Welcome to Celebrate Truth Radio. I'm your host, Robbie Davidson, and we've got an awesome show for you tonight. My special guest is Aaron Sampson from Omega Chronicles TV. We're going to be getting into so much tonight, a lot of different topics. It's going to be great. First off, I want to introduce my guest tonight. Aaron, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Sorry,
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no, it's great to finally get you on. Sorry about the technical difficulties here getting on, but we're on now. So let's go. For everyone that's not familiar with Aaron's work, who he is, what brought him to where he is today, maybe you could explain a little bit about your background, maybe get into your testimony so people are familiar with where you came from.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty. I don't know if it's a pretty reoccurring kind of story. I mean, I always joked about it. If I had to write a book, it would be called the Prodigal Sampson, because I mean that was pretty much my life. I came up under two very spiritual parents who didn't generationally have that kind of upbringing, but God really worked really hard in their lives to, break things that they were dealing with in their family, and which gave us kind of a head up, me and my sister, or my sister and myself, and so I was kind of given all the tools. I mean, I was homeschooled through high school, just because we had moved to a different area, and my mom used to be a teacher, so I kind of didn't have that, that indoctrination. My parents raised me to really think for myself and be free from that kind of thought process that you had to answer questions on a piece of paper, and that was knowledge to you, So, but yeah, I had all of that kind of upbringing. And then once I hit about 16 or 17 years old, I kind of started running off and doing my own thing. And God really had, I guess that was part of the plan. He had to have me out there in the world and experience things, because I went through a full gambit of different types of experience. I was actually married, my first wife, who I haven't seen in years upon years, but she actually asked me to marry her at 18 years old, and I got married, and then we were divorced by 22. Yeah, and then I was living by myself, and then I worked in the bar industry for a long time. I actually headed up a paranormal community group. Like, I mean, it was big into the paranormal scene. That was something that God called me into, because I saw what, it was real when everything got real popular with the ghost hunters and stuff like that, and I was seeing people getting involved. With my spiritual background, I was seeing people that were getting involved, and I knew even enough at that point that, hey, this was stuff you guys shouldn't be getting involved in, and so I really sought out to try to investigate myself and try to prove that the things that people were chasing after weren't what they thought they were. You weren't talking to your grandma in your kitchen, kind of stuff.
So were you investigating it from a Christian viewpoint already, or were you just intrigued with the paranormal?
Yeah, no, I was definitely doing it from a Christian viewpoint, because that was how I kind of, I mean, like I said, I had the spiritual background, but I just really didn't know how to utilize the tools. But I was writing for a paranormal magazine, and I had wrote an article called the Ghost Hunter's Prayer, and it was trying to push out there. It actually became pretty popular. The idea of what you're getting in there and playing with is not something that is just a ghost or somebody's dead aunt or uncle or something like that. Like, what you were dealing with could be far more drastic and dangerous than what you think.
Yeah, I find it also intriguing that it's usually like little boy, little girl, or it's an elderly man or an elderly woman. It's never in between, like Charles Manson looking type spirit. You know what I mean? It's always this innocence that's there that kind of attracts people to the paranormal.
Yeah, and that was kind of thing that I really wanted to point out to people. I also wrote another article called "The Dangers of the Paranormal," and it was just to try to open people up to that, because I mean there was so much stuff with it. One of the things I really found with the paranormal community was that there were more questions at the end of it than answers. You would ask, because there were things called like a ghost box or different ways to communicate. And to me, after everything that I did, to me, it was nothing but virtual Ouija boards. It was an opening up a portal or a pathway of communication with spirits from the other side. And you would ask questions to these things, and they would give you answers that were completely, you'd just be talking to them and like asking them things, and they'd be telling you stuff like, stop, it hurts, don't talk to me, get out. I mean, it was just completely, and I went in and was asking, how come you didn't go to heaven? How come you didn't do this? And then the answers and stuff that we got were more puzzling than, anything else. And so I really came out the other side saying this cannot be, that aspect of it cannot be your grandma or your aunt or your something like that, because
Correct.
what we were dealing with was something completely different. And then just like you said, with the study that we are involved in now, understanding how demonic principalities work,
Sure.
is you go in as a ghost hunter, and this little Timmy character starts talking to you or whatever, and you think, oh, it's cute, I want to invite him to come over and play with me. And then little Timmy follows you home, and you find out it's now you have
Well, little
dark
Timmy,
shadows.
when you start communicating with little Timmy, he seems pretty educated. He seems pretty intelligent. He seems like he's only got a real mean streak to him, in the sense of like what he's asking the children to do. It's interesting that you bring this up, because I had a good friend for years, and he got really super involved. I mean, his family owned a huge funeral home, so he was always really fascinated with the dead. And anyways, he started getting into the paranormal. You probably will know his name, but he appeared on a couple seasons of The Other Side. It was a big series here. It's brought up on a few networks, but I think it was mainly started in Canada. But it was called The Other Side. Anyways, I started talking with him, and eventually he quit. He quit the series. He got out. But what he said, and you can actually see it on the show, there was one spirit in particular that kind of followed them around, right? And in one episode, you actually see that spirit enter him. Like he literally, and once it entered him, I'll tell you, his life was ravished. He lost his wife, his children. He lost his job. He became a cocaine addict. I mean, that's the one thing that I tell people all the time, that once they're done using you, they'll just destroy you. They're done with you. I mean, they just completely take you out. So, yeah, I know I've actually been quite heavily involved in paranormal research, from that angle as well, too. So, especially with my interest in ministering to my friend and telling him the dangers, but he was able to see it for himself, being involved so heavily in communicating with these spirits. And he came to the same conclusion even before, becoming a Christian. He was like, this is evil. This is straight evil. These aren't people that have just died. This is something completely different.
Yeah, no. And several people who are involved in my group, even though as much as I try to protect everybody and to do, like spiritual prayers beforehand, and, we're invoking, Christian powers, praying blessings and protections from Jesus over people. But what I learned, if they aren't walking in the way, they're fully exposed. And one of my partners in there, we went to some of the most haunted places in the Midwest, and then she started having things happen to her around her house, and it drove her to the point where she was just like, I'm done. I don't ever want to talk about this stuff again. Definitely I've seen many people in the paranormal community fall down a bad rabbit hole, because you open yourselves up to things spiritually, and it can be very devastating. And like you said, these things aren't there to be your friend. They're there to destroy
I think he went
you.
by like Lucky or something, the spirit or whatever, but he basically said it was just straight evil. But once it entered him, he said his whole life was completely destroyed and ravished. And it took a lot for him, because I know he didn't have a job at the time, and he still was able to, send that email and saying, I'm not going on season 3, which was pretty profound. Unfortunately, nothing really stuck with him, but at least he has the realization that that whole world was straight demonic. It was, evil spirits masquerading themselves as something they're not.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I thank God for God's providence that I didn't run across anything, or He didn't allow anything to possess me or whatever because I think He gave me enough knowledge at the time to realize what we were playing with. But it's just kind of one of those things, and He got me out in time that, it's playing with fire. You play with fire long enough, you're going to get burnt. Sure. But God's always used, His divine providence it's always been, He's used things that I'm attracted to, that I'm interested in, to basically bring me into something that He can use for his kingdom. And I've always thought that was amazing, because it was things that I never saw connections to until you get to where there's point in your walk, and you go, oh, well, that's why I went through that, or I understand why he did that. So I think as much as I don't ever condone the paranormal community, but I was trying to do the best I could. Sure. There were several instances where we actually did rid entities from people's homes and stuff like that. But most of what I dealt with was just hysteria around the paranormal community. It was like people, heard everything that went bump in the night, and they thought there was a ghost, and it wasn't.
There's no doubt that it's real. I was actually personally involved in 2 exorcisms myself personally. Now, this wasn't, in a church or anything. This was just me and a friend dealing with something incredibly wicked both times. And, I can definitely say that it really exists. It's really out there. And a lot of people, might not want to believe it, but it does. And it really comes down to how much you open yourself up to these entities.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things that I was always concerned with people, because especially if you think it's a family member or friend or something like that that's trying to communicate with you, because now you're opening yourself up to them. There was one case from a group that was a very popular paranormal group who we knew and were a part of, that there was a lady who was spent all of her time, like literally 24, any hours awake, and sometimes she would wake up in the middle of the night and continue to talk to him, but she was recording these entities all the time and having like full on communications with her, and it literally overtook her life. And that's the thing that scares me about, that whole paranormal community, is that you're spending your life with the dead, and that she didn't leave her house, she didn't do anything, and it took over her life. And that's on the lighter scale. I've seen people get steeped into drugs and things like that. They just got into super deep depression and all kinds of crazy, so I don't ever recommend it. I tell people to stay as far away from that as possible. But God did use it, gave me a lot of understanding, because I can tell you firsthand, and I've said this, people have asked me, well, why do you believe in God? And I have literally stood face to face with a demon.
Yep, 100%.
And if that is real, then God has to be real.
And when you see the true power, especially invoking like Jesus' name, you see kind of the true power and the fear that they have. Because, I've been in instances where people, like, I would tell them, like, call out on the name, and they literally would get tongue-tied. Like, I literally would witness them trying with all their might to do it. Eventually it was done, but you could just tell there was that struggle, that spiritual struggle, right? I mean, I have many stories involved in the spiritual world that you do know that he exists 100% when you come to the realization of the spiritual reality that we live in, and then also the true power and the fear that they have in that name.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then that was one of the things that really kind of started to turn my life around, was when I realized the tangibility of the evil of this world. Yeah. Then I looked back on all the things that my parents had told me and talked to me, and I was like, okay, if this is real, then the whole God and Jesus and the aspects of all of that has to be real, because this evil can't be, because if that evil was able to just run free without any kind of restraint, then this world would look a million times worse than what it is.
100%. And especially in the truther community. And that's what I find so bizarre sometimes, where, you'll have so many people looking into the elite and looking into the spirituality of, these crazy people that run the world. And, it all links back to Satanism, right? Luciferianism, all these type of, occult mystery schools type scenarios. And it's like, guys, like, okay, wait a minute. So these guys are all following this entity and this power from this illuminated one. And yet you have a hard time believing God exists. Like, you believe Satan, but you don't believe God exists, so it's just really sometimes frustrating, where people will come to the reality of understanding that, there's something a little deeper going on. And there is, you might not believe in Satan, but again, a lot of the world's elite do, and they follow him, and they're pretty successful and powerful in this world. And the question is why? Why? And that's when people are scratching their head, they're like, well, I don't get it. How is it that evil men can, rule the world in that sense, right? That's what is the paradox that people have a hard time understanding, right? I don't get it. Yeah. Why does that happen? And then we can talk more about getting into that reality. So, okay, so you got into the paranormal and all that, and then what did it lead to you next?
So I was continuing. I became, I was working in the bar industry. I also became a very prominent DJ in my city. And I actually had several different options or, opportunities with the paranormal thing to start pursuing that. I had multiple different television stations like reaching out to our group saying, hey, we want you to be a part of this. And I really knew that God didn't have my calling in that, so I really stepped away from that. But I was still working in the bar industry and DJing, and that also brought temptation. It's funny because it was the temptation of Satan, just like Jesus was tempted in the wilderness. If Satan can go to Jesus and tempt him, then we should expect that he's going to tempt us, But so I also had some temptations with, the DJ industry, and I really could have taken that and went that way. But again, I didn't feel like that was God's calling for me. So I continued down that for some time until a few years ago, I was at a New Year's Eve party, one of the biggest nightclubs in Indianapolis where I live. And a fight had broken out, and a bouncer ran in front of me and stepped on my foot. And it broke a bone in my foot and ripped the tendon off the top of my foot. Mm-hmm. And it literally I had to have 2 surgeries on my foot, and it put me out for 6 months. And that was like my final wake-up call. I had been through a bunch of failed relationships. I had a son who I absolutely loved, which was a pivotal in where we're going with this, because I guess I'll backtrack a little bit about my son. I kept praying to God over and over and over again for a family, because I was raised to be a father and husband and all of this kind of stuff. And so I kept always searching for that. And I kept jumping from relationship to relationship, trying to fill a God-sized hole with something that I couldn't fill with relationships. And then when I found out that wasn't doing it, then I would get rid of that person and move to the next one. But I was praying to God constantly through that. And many times he was telling me to wait and to be patient. And at one point he said that I would have a family soon. Didn't say I would have a wife, but said I would have a family soon. And I had to wait for 6 months. And there was some stuff that happened with that where I wasn't obedient. And then it became, it was like got another distraction, another thing that God, kind of was like testing me, and I failed. But to the day from that point, I found my son's mother, and we were in a long-term relationship, and then I had my son. But I really learned a huge thing with the process with my son, which was unconditional love. One of my biggest problems, like up to where that point was I had no concept of God's love. And I didn't understand how a God could love mankind unconditionally. I always had questions about, if he knew that, we were all going to do this, why create us in the first place?
Correct.
Those kind of questions, and I didn't understand unconditional love. So it really put a big divide between the father and myself. Mm-hmm. And when I had my son and I learned unconditional love, and I started seeing how God sees us through how I see my son, that it really started to change my heart. It started chipping away at that hardened heart that I had. But eventually his mother and I had split up, and that was a really tough time for me. I went through a bunch of unsuccessful relationships. And then I get to this point where I broke my foot. So now I am completely, I'm laid up on the couch. I don't have anybody to take care of me because I just had broken up with my last girlfriend because of the whole situation. And so I'm laid up, and it's just me and God for 6 months. And through that process, I basically went to God and I said, look, God, my kingdom that I had built up is crumbling around me. And this is not your fault. I'm not going to blame you. This is my fault. And I don't want to do things my way anymore. I want to do things your way. And I, had this time to be with God. And one of the main things that he told me was he had to heal me of some of these things that I had been involved in. And I had to repent for a lot of the stuff that I was involved in, all the multiple relationships, the womanizing, the being involved with the paranormal community, anything that I could have let or opened doors with. And that was through the 6-month process that God put me through. And one of the main things was I need to stop chasing after relationships, and I need to build my relationship with God and trust him. And he had told me in that time, look, don't even attempt to try to date anybody. Don't pursue any relationship, pursue a relationship with me. And so I did that. He gave me a year time. And then he also told me to grow my hair out, which I don't know if anybody can see from the picture, but I have pretty long hair now. And that's me. He said to start growing my hair out. I'd never had my hair long before. And he said that the woman who I was going to meet was going to love long hair. And I was like, okay, God, I'm going to be obedient, because I said I'm going to do things your way.
Just don't let her cut it.
Right.
Anyways, go ahead.
Well, it was funny because, again,
I'm just going to say, if he sent you like Delilah, run. You know what I mean? I'm just kidding, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, but so I thought it was, it's funny, but God has a sense of humor. And I think it's funny. My last name's Sampson. Yeah, and he's telling me to grow my hair out.
It's like crazy. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Now, I haven't tried to push over any pillars or anything. I don't think I have that kind of power. But I just thought it was funny because that's what everybody knows me for. And it's easy to recognize, hey, it's Sampson with the long hair. My name, everybody's always known me as Sampson. My DJ name was DJ Sampson. So, when you have a last name like Sampson, everybody calls you that anyway. So, but yeah, so I was being obedient to God through this time frame. And I got through the part of my foot healing and stuff, and I started going back out. And then I met my wife now, who absolutely love. It's just a complete blessing from God. Completely fills my other side. Everything that I was looking for, she fulfills that. And I think it was fantastic. And the way that God did it was just awesome. And what was funny, I think that I love telling this story because it just shows how God knows all of these things, and we are just so impatient. So I always thought my wife is 11 years younger than me. So when I was back praying at 16, and 18 and 20 and 30, like when you do the numbers, right? When she was 16, or when I was 16, praying for God to find my partner, and he says, wait, she was 5 years old.
That's crazy.
You know, when I was 18, she was 7, you know?
Yeah, my wife's
so as
12
you keep
years.
going,
My wife's 12 years younger than me, so I totally understand what you're saying there.
Yeah, yeah. And so when I looked back and I was like, okay, I have this amazing woman and God's brought her into my life and we're married and this and that. And then I looked back and I'm like, wow, any other time when I was back praying for this person, he kept telling me to wait and be patient. It would either have been illegal or weird, you know, up until the time we actually met. So I thought it was awesome. And the kicker was that she loved my long hair and still doesn't let me cut it to this day. So, you know, I mean, he was completely right on everything that he said. You know, when he says that he's going to do a work, he finishes it. You know, I think it's funny that with the way that our human nature is, that we almost always want to see something now. And I've come to understand that God lines up things like dominoes. And sometimes it takes a little while, but once it starts going and it gets to your point, all he's doing is waiting for you to fall over, you know, in line with all the rest of them. So I just love like to talk about those things, because those experiences where God does things that are completely out of your control, it's just a testament to the power that he has, that, you know, it's not made up. It's not, you know, something that you had control of subconsciously or in the background or whatever. There's no way. When God makes a move, you look at it and see what you even can see, because sometimes it's things that happen in a chain of events that you don't even know about. And I think, you know, I just think about that and it just blows my mind that we serve a God that is how he works, and he does it in a way that you can see his hand involved in it, you know, that there's no other possible way.
Specifically, you know, and especially when you're called for his purposes. I mean, if you actually think about how much detail and how much care he's looking at your entire life, you know, especially in those callings. I mean, you see it, you know, throughout the Bible with people that were called, but even in present day, you know, when you do have a calling on your life, every detail, you know what I mean, is just so miraculous. I could go into so many stories just like that, and it's just absolutely incredible. That's gives you the awe and wonder of just how amazing our God is.
Yeah, no, it's and it's, you know, from that point, I mean, like God's completely turned my life around. Like, he took what was, you know, somebody who was at the bottom of,
so
you know, like I said.
How old were you then when you got married to your wife?
So that we just got married three years ago. What this happened was a year before, because he told me to wait a year, and I met her almost a year to the day from that point.
How old were you then?
So we got married. You're gonna put me on spot, and she's gonna laugh at me about this.
No, it's just roughly, just roughly. I mean, you can.
Well, I know when everything happened with my foot, I was 33 years old, and then I got, you know, met her 34, and then we just got married 3 years ago.
There's
so
that number 33, big pivotal change happening, right? So
yeah.
Well, I'm just saying that because usually, you know, 30s are a very significant biblical type start for a lot of ministries. You know what I mean? If you actually look at it, I mean, Jesus, I mean, he started his ministry at 30. You know, so a lot of things, you know, like that patience. I mean, everything was kind of waiting up until that point. So yeah, it's just intriguing. That's all I was trying to find out, not specific dates, but just, you know, ballpark. How old were you?
Yeah, and even before that, when my son was born, I was 30.
Yeah.
So would have been the beginning of the change. So yeah, no, I completely agree. And when I looked at that, I saw the same thing, and I was like, I've actually known quite a few people who have gotten into the ministry and stuff, and it happened right around the exact same time.
Yeah. It's a pretty significant time for sure. Well, that's super exciting.
So yeah, no, I mean, and the Holy Spirit works like that, you know. Like I said, again, it shows the fingerprint of God, that his actions are working in the same way, you know. So I know, I think it's awesome. And like I said, from that point, it was a couple of years ago when I went to my first Take on the World conference. God had been calling me. Oh yeah, let's go back a little bit, because this is another one of those instances. So I got into Twitch streaming with gaming, because I've always been a huge gamer. Okay. And so I was big into this gaming thing, and then I had a bunch of other friends who were doing it. They're like, man, you should do this because you're a DJ, you have a voice, you know, you can talk, you can do all this stuff. You'd be awesome as a Twitch streamer. So I was like, I don't know how to do any of this. So I spent like, I don't know, 50 some hours learning how to work OBS studios and create, you know, overlays and get the right equipment and the right microphone and the right, you know, HD camera. So I went out and spent all this money and all this time to work on this. And I started doing the Twitch streaming, and it got really popular. Actually got, you know, like picked up by the Twitch where you can actually get sponsored and stuff like that. And then I got really bored.
Okay.
I started it off. I learned everything I needed to know. I had everything set up the way I wanted to, and then I just completely lost interest.
Yeah.
And then God went, well, hey, so now that you know how to do all this stuff, now I want you to start actually doing videos, and all the things that I've been teaching you, I want you to outreach to people, and I want you to do this. And I couldn't argue with him, because again, he used something that drew me in, and then he was like, hey, this isn't what I want you to do it for. I want, but I know it's like a fish hook, it's like you just reel it in, so so then I was like, okay, cool, I'm gonna go gung-ho for this. And then I started like I built my channel, my Facebook and all that, and then I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, and so I kind of left it alone for a while. And then I went to Take on the World a couple of years ago, and this was the first time I had met you.
This was 20. Oh, so this was the first year. So you went on the second year, right? 2018.
Yeah, second year.
Okay.
Yeah, 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to meet and hang out with some of the people who I'd been, like Rob Skiba and yourself, and I mean, just so many of the guys who I was looking at on YouTube, going, man, their ministry is like reaching people, and it's changing lives and stuff. And so I got to meet them, hang out with them, have lunch with them, all kinds of stuff. And I realized that they were just, normal people that God called to do this. Mm-hmm. And, it wasn't like they were like, movie stars and and the person, and like, it just drew me to that community. And I made some really cool, friend connections, and started working that through. And then the next year I started getting things going, but I never really got attached with that year. We ended up, my wife and I got married. We had a baby, we moved. So kind of everything happened. Then we get to the second year, which is actually the third year of Take on the World. And I go and I get to meet everybody again and meet some new people, and got in touch with Ian, who I had met the year before, but he was actually up in this is Ian Chadrick, who is he runs the Holy Hand Grenade channel, which our show is on. But he was there the year before, and I got to talk with him and hang out with him. But this year, that year, he was up and he was doing shows. Like, he was like actually up in front of everybody doing, his own presentation and stuff. I'm like, wow, man, in 1 year, he's went from, doing his videos, he had the same calling the year before, except he actually did some and I didn't. Mm-hmm. And then he was up the next year doing presentations and stuff, and then being on panels and everything. I'm like, man, this is awesome. So I was like, God put the fire under me again. So I'm like trying to find a co-host, and I'm like, man, I'm going to get this going. And then Ian calls me up and he's like, hey man, I'm about to do a show. You want to be a part of it? I'm like, nice. God was tired of waiting on me, really. Yeah. He was like, all right, look, I'm not waiting on you anymore. Here's somebody that's going to get everything going, already has an established channel and all this other stuff. And you guys are going to do this. So yeah, so that's Ian Chadrick, and he's been on your show before. I think it was a couple of weeks. Yeah. So, and he had an awesome video too, if anybody didn't get to watch that. If you want to understand, Ian's kind of backstory and how we kind of converge is right at this point. So
yeah, and in a future show we're gonna have like both of you on, and you guys can go through just the show itself. And so yeah, I definitely want to have both of you on and like do kind of more of a panel type show on that on that type. So we'll do that at some point for sure. But yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I got talking to Ian, the first year I went, didn't really get to talk to him once. And then 2019 we got sitting down and then we just went off. You know what I mean? So I really got to know Ian well. Yeah, it was really great. But he was like going off on this stuff, and I said, whoa, wait. Just think of me as like I need 101, because he was going into like all these like really X, like the X and really D stuff. And I'm like, wait, hold on. We got to start with 101. It's like flat Earth, right? Let's start with like flat Earth for dummies first, right? And then we'll work our way up, because he was talking such advanced stuff, and I hadn't heard a lot of the stuff that he was talking about. But yeah, it was a real joy getting to know him and everyone at Take on the World, and yeah, just a fantastic crew. But no, that's awesome. So he called you up and said, hey, let's do a show, and you're like, right on. So yeah, I mean, God was actually getting tired of waiting for you to instigate anything, right? So it's just like, okay, I'll present it on his lap.
Yeah, and I mean, we started our first episode in January of this year. Of course, Ian's channel has a ton of stuff. I mean, his gifts are awesome. I mean, the way God has built him is he, just like myself, he's able to pull information from kind of all over the place, but he has a talent with creating videos and stuff, and then like pulling things from different videos and then putting them in a storyline that just spells out everything in a visual, he just has an amazing gift with that. But I highly recommend anybody go to his channel, especially in the conspiracy theory community, because he's tied so much stuff together that's across the board. We even joked about it on our show, saying that we were going to do a fishbowl of conspiracy theories and then pull them out and then talk about the transition from one to the next and how all of them tie together, because it's obvious that everything ties together, especially if you believe in a powerful God and then a devil that runs and is called the God and the prince of this earth. Well, there is somebody that's controlling behind the screen, behind the strings behind everything, and that's our adversary. Absolutely. And so all you have to do is just kind of see this person's tied to this person's tied to this person, and see through a flow through history of all of why conspiracy theories are there, is because there is some force that is pushing to this, the entire world, this end goal. So. Yeah, I would definitely say check out Ian's channel and check out some of his videos.
If you're aware, on the YouTube, in the description, I've linked to both channels, but Omega Chronicles TV, Aaron's channel, the links are in the description, as well as the Holy Hand Grenade, which they do their show. And maybe you can explain the show as far as what SITREP stands for. Yeah,
so SITREP is, because we know this is a war, that's our biggest thing that we're trying to push is God's kind of dividing the, like what we would say the pew sitters, right? It says biblically that he doesn't, if you're lukewarm, he'll spit you out of your mouth, or out of his mouth, right? So what he's doing and what we've seen is he's kind of removed the gray, and the battle lines are being drawn, and everything that's been happening current topics, we're seeing that, people that you thought would be on one side, there's being a paradigm shift that's, people are picking sides and switching, going from one side to the other, and like there's no room for gray anymore. And so what we're trying to bring to the Christian community on all fronts is that this is a war. It's a beautiful war, because like I said,
again, war nonetheless, right? We're in a spiritual war for sure. Yeah.
And we have to understand that we are involved in that. And so the whole point of SITREP 2020, when we first started, it was to empower and to teach people spiritual gifts and to give them, like a step by step of what God's calling us to do, and in an open forum, open community, because the people that we're involved with in our chats and stuff like that are people that we've known and we've met and that we see every week in our, in our chat, and we have this kind of family environment. And so we're just kind of like walking through this, and the SITREP means a situation report. So the way that I view it is a situation report from the battle lines of the front of the war, right? Because we're going head on into our, what God is calling us to, is to take on the enemy, and these powers and principalities and wickedness in high places. So that is kind of like what it is. A situation report is somebody coming from the front line and reporting back to the others and telling them what they're seeing on the front lines. So that's kind of what we're looking at with situation report. And we had no concept of what was going to be popping off this year. Mm-hmm. And so it's been awesome to see that God has used our position where we were at, where he set us up to be kind of the mouthpiece to different communities about what is going on the front lines.
Well, let's get right into it, because obviously this is where you specialize, in your ministries, obviously working with Ian Chadrick, but also yourself, where you've got a strong passion to get the information out that you feel that, God is calling you to. And, I'd like to just, jump right into it, and some things that we're seeing here even recently. What's your thoughts on what's going on here recently? Because we could work our way backwards or we can work forward. But 2020, my goodness, it has been a year like no other. I don't think even the hardest core truther could even imagine this many events taking place, this rapid, this, extreme. And just the escalation, right? And compliance of certain things that we're seeing. It's hard to even wrap your head around it sometimes, where you're like, what is the end goal? We can look at the big picture, but sometimes, even when the coronavirus thing hit, people had all their theories and stuff. But really, I think it's really hard for people to look at it and go, well, wait a minute. Like the whole coronavirus, a lot of people, it's martial law, it's to lock us all down, martial law. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. But we are seeing different states operate, independently, right? So if this was a complete federal mandate rollover where it's going to take over America, well, how come you've got two different things going on, right? certain ones are opening, certain ones are closed down, so there weren't things that were cut and dry as far as like if this was the agenda and this is the game plan. I mean, this might be a stepping stone, over time, but is this the grand finale? I don't think so personally, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on kind of what you're seeing, but also even recently with just now we're getting to a point of abolishing police departments and saying, hey, let's get rid of prisons and court systems. I mean, it's getting pretty insane out there.
Yeah, no, and it definitely is. And I mean, this is a serious topic. Everything that's going on, like, again, we only get a portion of it, right? What we see on the news, you titled this as All the World's a Stage, right? So what we see on the news is what they want us to see. Mm-hmm. So the amount of information that we're getting and the type of information we're getting, depending on where you sit. If you're a Republican and you're listening to Fox News, you're going to get Fox News's version of the events. If you're on the left and you're listening to CNN, you're going to get CNN's version of the events. And if you're bipartisan, you are confused beyond everybody else because you have no idea what's going on. Yeah. And so I think that's part of what is happening is because they don't, especially in the truther community, though the powers that be know that the truther community can unite on a topic such like flat Earth, right? Sure. There's a lot. I mean, that was a groundswell that I don't think that they were prepared for.
Well, it was pretty much right across unifying in the sense that other than maybe firmament dome versus an infinite plane, I would say that the vast majority, 90% of the community were all under pretty much one model, right? They didn't know 100%, but the thing was, it was more of a conflicting of personalities. It really wasn't to do with the actual theory itself. I mean, it was pretty simple. It's like they're trying to hide a creator. They're trying to hide God, right? And this is the way they've done it. I mean, I thought that was really profound with flat Earth. It wasn't just a normal conspiracy. It all led people to the truth that, my goodness, there is a God right above us. That was very, very profound. You don't get that in 9/11. You don't get that in Sandy Hook. You don't get that in any of these kind of, dark, really twisted type conspiracies. But with this, you get this whole, wow, your world opens up and you're like, my goodness, they're trying to hide God. Because if we're just an endless spinning ball in space and we've evolved over millions of years, we're worthless, we're of no value, where all of a sudden, instantly, when you're placed in a dome flat, with the sun, moon, and stars inside, all that kind of stuff, when you get to that reality, you're like, wait a minute, someone built this thing, right? There is a creator, right? So that was the really profound thing when it came to flat Earth. But I agree with you. There was a lot of continuity overall with just that main message being pushed. They're lying to us. And the main thing, who they're trying to hide, is God.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I think it scared them a little bit because we were able collectively to pick out and pick apart everything that they were throwing out. I thought it was the funniest thing when I got involved in the flat Earth aspect was because I worked for a company that we actually we took over another company who is a very well-known satellite company, for satellite TV. Mm-hmm. And so I remember before this all kind of really picked off, got kicked off and everything, I remember questioning how it is that I'm able to point a satellite up into the sky. And if we're traveling and rotating and we're going through space and we're spiraling and going around the sun and all this, how I can point a satellite up to the sky, and 50 years from now, that satellite is still in the same spot. Yeah. I really had it it just blew my mind. And then when the whole flat Earth, it really resonated with me because there were so many things that I saw empirically that I always question science, and I'm a big numbers person and I'm a huge Occam's razor person. Mm-hmm. So when I realized that there's two options and one of them is they just put a bunch of zeros behind it so that the normal layman can't, they can't grasp the concept of a chalkboard full of chicken scratches. The easiest explanation is definitely that God created it. There's a dome. It's the biblical explanation is far easier to go over and say this is how it was done than it is to try to explain, gravity and astrophysics. It's so
grand. I think it's just so grand that people can't grasp it because it's just too big. It's just too big. And the thing is, people will say too many people would have to be in on it. Everyone would have to be on this lie. And I always sit there and say, and I know I get a lot of pushback from this, but Neil deGrasse Tyson, for example, I don't think he has the foggiest clue. I think he thinks that flat Earth is ridiculous, but it's not like he wakes up, with his family and says, today I'm going to go out and deceive more people thinking that they're on, a globe Earth. He believes it. He was taught it, right? It's like indoctrination is so strong. I don't believe. Now, when you get to people that have actually, quote unquote, been to space and all that, really, there's not a lot of people that need to be in on that, conspiracy. So for the most part, it's not like people are openly lying by the hundreds of thousands. They're not. They're just 100% convinced because, again, we're going to get back to, like you said, the prince of the air, right? And talking about the God of this world. I mean, he blinds the minds of the unbelievers. Is Neil deGrasse Tyson a believer, right? Well, I mean, the chances of being blinded if you're not on the right side are very good. So obviously he's illuminated by something else. So he doesn't have to be in on anything. He just has to think that anything else other than quote unquote reality and what he thinks it is, would be silly and foolish, right? But I think it's really because it's so grand, people have a hard time with it. But yeah, that was one thing that there was a lot of continuity. I've heard people say, well, the whole 2020 thing, they're doing all of this because Flat Earth was becoming too popular. And I'm just, guys, okay, don't get ahead of yourself, right? Flat Earth was not that big a threat. You might have thought it was to the powers that be, but when your neighbors are laughing at you, they don't have to do a thing. They don't have to bring in infiltrators and all that. Really, it's a minimized type of thing. I know that people didn't like hearing that. And even though it was growing leaps and bounds for sure, and it will continue to do so, it's not a threat where they're like, oh my goodness, what do we do? What do we do? So this idea, personally, that 2020, coronavirus, everything, the riots, all this stuff was seriously because Flat Earth was becoming too popular. Come on, guys. Come on. I mean, you're going to do this much havoc to every single country of the world because too many people are realizing that NASA's lying. Guys, come on. If you actually think the truther community holds that much power, it's good that we're affecting people, that we're getting the message out there. But, you got to look beyond that and think, wait a minute, there's something bigger going on. Everything doesn't revolve around the truther community in the sense that, oh my goodness, they're worried, they're scared. The truth's coming out. Well, not necessarily. Not necessarily when pretty much, your own neighbors or friends are going to laugh at you. If all of a sudden all your neighbors and friends are coming over to your house and saying, please tell me about this flat earth, now it's a worry for them.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I don't think it's a danger on the level that they would do what they're doing. There's definitely a larger picture that's being involved. Mm-hmm. But I do see, like I said, a change. I mean, I've been involved in the like I said, the paranormal community, which is it went at some points hand in hand with the conspiracy theorist, especially back in the 90s. I call myself a pre 9/11 conspiracy theorist because I was involved in conspiracy theories and eschatology. That was my big, even though I may have not been super into going to church and stuff, I was always huge into eschatology. Yeah. I guess my theory on it was, well, if I could know when the signs is, maybe I can start acting right then. Sure.
Sure. Yeah.
I was huge into eschatology.
So was I.
And so the study of what was going on conspiratorially was huge. So I was always involved in that. And what I really have seen a shift in is we had to dig for information before, you would literally have to look up and I'm talking up to about a year ago, mm-hmm. Maybe, like I said, with everything with flat earth has kind of changed that a little bit, but we used to literally have to go out and dig for information, go to libraries, look things up. You'd have to go, if you were investigating a person, go look at their history, where did they go to school at? Who are they associated with? You'd see all these kind of things. Go through 1,000 pictures of them to see what, if they had a, Freemason ring or, sure. Whatever. So, and then now you don't, it was like with the last couple things that have come up, I really feel like that the powers that be that are observing everything that's going on. And this, I think, ties into Q as well. Mm-hmm. They have basically looked at the truther community as problematic. Sure. Yeah. And so what they've done is they've been doing this for a long time. There's something you can look up called COINTELPRO. And I don't know if you're familiar mm-hmm. with this, but this was initiated all the way back into the 40s. It's an abbreviation for a government project called was a counterintelligence program. And what they were doing was interjecting CIA and FBI agents into groups all the way back to the women's liberation movement, the Black Panthers, the Black Power movement, and they would be instigators that would go into groups. And anybody think this sounds familiar?
Well, apparently I'm one of them because I've been classified a deep state agent by quite a few people in the flat earth community. So
well, what do you do?
Yeah, well, what do you do? And that was another thing too is the infighting. I mean, one of the strategies just cause infighting, right? I mean, as long as you got that going on, then you don't kind of unify on anything, then divided you fall, right?
Yeah, no, and they're taking literally a page out of the Book of War, yeah. The divide and conquer. And we even have this, United We Stand is, I think it's on our money, right? United. So we have this kind of idea that united we stand, divided we fall. But then what does the government do is interjects division into every single topic.
Sure.
I mean, if you look back, I don't, of course, I grew up under the Reagan era and then Bush Senior and, into the Clinton era and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember things being different. My dad would listen to Rush Limbaugh and all, this stuff when we were at home. And so I remember like just things being different. And then it just got progressively worse as far as interjection from the government, where they were dividing into every single topic, where it made you like force choice. With this dualistic persona, like, left or right, like, Republican, Democrat. And the reason why I believe that this has been their goal is because you can take 10 Christians, sit them in a room, and then drop political topics on them, and not all 10 of them will agree. When you're talking about abortion, gay rights, 501c3, the power of church and state, how much influence should Christianity have in government? They're not going to agree on anything, because that has been the driving force is division, and that has spilled over into. I mean, look at just Christianity in general. There are 33,000 Protestant denominations, and we just had a great guest on our show the other day, and he was talking about the prophecy and of the two sticks, and the combining of those two sticks together. His name is Gavin Finley. He's got a great thing on. It escapes me now.
There's a lot of those denominations, though, that aren't fighting with one another, though. I know what you're saying. There's a ton of denominations. A lot of people look at that as like it's a bad sign. And to me, honestly, denominations aren't that bad. I mean, in the sense of having different beliefs. Now, if they have essentials that completely, are, quantified to be divisible, I understand that. When you get into the essentials, if they're differing on that, I mean, that's kind of what, I guess, cults are made of. You know what I mean? Usually we define them as a cult. But what I'm saying is overall, the denominations, I mean, just people are different. For example, somebody wants to jump up and down and be excited to worship. The other one wants to be more somber and reverent, right? There's different churches for those different type of environments. I'm just using that as an example. But for me, I've always brought this up as a point that it's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think in this world, in this day and age, you could ever have one unifying keep to every single core doctrine. You know what I mean? And I say that the danger is when we start fighting over secondary doctrines that aren't salvational, that really doesn't matter. We can have that difference of opinion, and we don't have to divide. Now, when the body of Christ starts dividing and fighting with one another, and it's like over, I say something to do with, eschatology. Okay, pre-trib or, Now, we can sit there and say, I don't believe in pre-tribulation, but what about the people that do? Is it worth dividing over your brother and sister that believe that? But people will say, no, it's a big deal. If you believe that, you're a heretic or whatever. I mean, you brought up eschatology. Honestly, pre-trib, post-trib, mid-trib, whatever, right? No trib, no rapture at all. That's just an example, but there's a lot of denominations that fight over silly issues. That's, I think, the problem. Same thing what we're seeing right now with a lot of people like freaking out and fighting, and they're making a big deal of like race. Well, they've been and tried to incite race wars for so long. I mean, is institutionalized racism, does it even exist in America? What corporation can you not get a job because you're the color of your skin? Where does it exist? So like sometimes they'll blow these things up, but they have this kind of illusion with people that they think it's so much bigger than it is. I think I was watching a video about the stats. We can start talking about the riots or Black Lives Matter. But, when you got into the stats, way more white people are killed by police than blacks, right? Now, I think anybody being killed by the police or police brutality is a problem. Don't get me wrong. But what I'm saying is usually when all of a sudden they use this to push something and then going so extreme as saying all police are bad now. We need to abolish all police. Well, the reality that how could all police be bad?
Yeah. And that's what I've been trying to get people to understand with the greater, like we have to step away from our fleshly perception of things and look at what is going on in the spiritual realm.
Yes.
To realize that we say it's systemic racism. Well, I think it's systemic sin is what causes all of this. And we have to understand
it's a sin issue, not a skin issue. I've been saying that for years and years. I mean, like you go so far, this is just sinful behavior. Hate is hate. I mean, it has nothing to do with that. Like you said, get to the roots, get into the spiritual nature of what these issues are. It's sin. Yeah, it's evil. It's right and wrong. I mean, something's either right or it's wrong. It's good or it's evil. That's all it is. But this whole idea that, it comes down to like skin, it's sin. And I mean, I've been saying that for a long time. And I mean, right now it's just really tough, when people are moving so forward. But I think in ways there's been a lot of hijacking that's gone on where all of a sudden most of the stuff we're seeing now has nothing to do with George Floyd. I mean, it's long gone past that. So I want to, rather than more of the psychology, because I think a lot of people, that are listening to the show, understand the premise that right and left, they try to divide us and they're both part of the same bird and all this kind of stuff. I want to get more into the details on your perspective. What's going on? What's the agenda? What's happening right now with what you're seeing with these takeovers of cities, like new countries being formed in Seattle? What's going on with the coronavirus, the lockdowns, like all these sort of things. 2020, let's just start breaking down. What are you seeing? What do you think that's coming? And overall, what can people do in this time?
Sure. Yeah. And what I've kind of seen is the powers that be, they, for the longest time, and we talk about biblically, we talk about the birth pains, and I'm kind of seeing that. If you look at the last time something major was pushed, we looked at 9/11 and saw the Patriot Act pushed. That was 19 years ago, and then we've seen more initiated and instituted in 6 months than we have seen from 9/11 to today.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to just say that, I think is insane. If
it's
you had
shocking.
told me,
I mean, we're living in a precedent. If people only stop and think about how profound 2020 is going to be in the history books, that alone is so incredibly profound. Just to stop and think about the time that we're living, that we've been chosen to be born in a time that we're actually going to see these events take place. I mean, we're only halfway through 2020.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we got another half to go, and it seems like it's ramping up and it's escalating to we don't know what's coming next. I mean, no one could have predicted this was going on, when coronavirus hit. They're thinking, people are going to be upset and they don't want to be locked down and people are, protesting. No one saw this part coming. And then what's going to be coming next? Yeah.
And really, I mean, when I looked at eschatology, I mean, I never would have picked, a fake pandemic. If I had a bingo card, I was banking on fake alien invasion, an injection that changed your DNA. I never would have this was not on my radar at all. And I think for most people in the eschatology community or even truther community, they wouldn't have seen this coming.
No.
And like I said, I think that is been the plan. They have literally been watching the truther community, and this ties back to Q. What Ian and I have kind of come to the understanding is that they have built AI technology that they have, put on the web, and it studies groups of people like Q. And like I said, Ian has a lot more information on this than I do. But what I look at it is I think Q was an AI technology that basically created an echo chamber for the truther community. And what it did is got everybody who was scattered all over the place, all over the internet, to one location. And then they were able to, that AI was able to go through all of the Facebook pages, all of the truther community websites and stuff all over the internet, gather the information, jumble it up, and then regurgitate that image or that information in an echo chamber. And from that, they were able to just basically map out and understand the truther community. And because since that's been instituted, we have seen a complete change in the truther community. For the
record, just to be on the record here, you believe that Q is bad or good?
I am not for Q.
Okay. That's fine. I just, people that are listening in, it's important just to kind of preface that where you stand on Q, because they might be thinking all of a sudden you're a Q supporter or whatever. So you're saying that Q is not good.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that Q was meant to gather information from us. And then basically what you were seeing with Q was it was just basically, I mean, you're more inclined to agree with something that you already think if somebody else says it to you. So what they did was just took what everybody was already putting on the internet, and then they kind of jumbled it up, made it like some kind of investigatory thing where you had to go investigate something you already knew. You felt like you're a part of something. This is all psychology. It's called
totally,
game
totally.
theory.
I mean, it's totally the white hats versus the black hats. And I mean, it's all tribalism. And I mean, there's a lot of psychology behind it. But for me, personally, I've always looked at the Q as I've just looked at it as absolutely ridiculous. I'm actually surprised that so many people are falling for it. Now, I'm not saying some of the things that, aren't interesting, but when it gets to a point where people are actually saying, look, all this stuff is taking place, they're locking everyone down all over the world so they can get a bunch of pedophiles and evil people and round them up. I'm like, do you understand? Are you listening to yourself? Can you imagine going to that extent? I mean, we've had Nathan Reynolds on before, and he acted, as an assassin way back in time or whatever. Now he's even gone on the record saying, "Look, there's an easier way to round up people, right, or take them out in their sleep. There's a way of you could do this stealthily. You don't need to shut down the entire world." And then people are saying, well, they're shutting everyone down and martial law is coming in. We're not going to be allowed out. Well, they were wrong on that, right? So what I'm saying is overall, a lot of the things, that people are saying, it just seems like right now, interesting enough, the truther community are almost at a point where they don't know what's going on, what's coming next, what is the big picture going on. I mean, I agree with you with Q that I think that it's a lineup. I think it's kind of that false kind of, pseudo, not the Antichrist, but almost the Messiah-like figure, you know what I mean? That's going to stomp out evil, and they're lining themselves up to actually get duped by, maybe an Antichrist system. But I am very, very shocked at how many people really jumped on the Q bandwagon. And then when this thing started happening in 2020, I mean, they went so far as to say that, all this is taking place so they can round up pedophiles and take out the evil people. And, I'm still waiting to find out when Hillary is going to prison.
Yeah. Well, again, I think like I said, this is game theory. They studied us enough to realize that they know how to kind of circumvent our studies, and they know that most people don't want to do the work. So it's easier for them to just, massively dump information out there. Sure. And then people are just going to accept that as, well, hey, look, I found this meme and it's the truth because I didn't do any research, but I saw it on the internet, Yeah,
well, that's important. That's why it's good that, you're out there and you have shows. And I mean, it's important that certain truthers speak on these things. Now, you can speak them in love. You don't have to talk down to people and make them feel stupid or whatever. But I think it's very important because they're relying on us, not just to basically get this information and certain people to wake up, but then all of a sudden start infighting with the people that do believe in Q. You know what I mean? And now you're going to separate, and all of a sudden, you've just basically lost at that point. So I'm all about, educating and helping people to understand certain things. But just logically speaking, just think of the logistics on shutting down the whole world to get a bunch of pedophiles and evil people. Like, to me, it's just like, it's like a science fiction movie. I mean, it's like something Hollywood would do. It's just so bizarre. And then the whole idea of with Trump. Now, don't get me wrong. I go on the record many times. You got Joe Biden or Trump all the way for me. I don't care what people think, like, oh, Trump is just part of the plan. I've gone on the record saying, you know what, there's more than meets the eye there. Sure, I understand the left-right paradigm. But I'm sorry, there's some things that are going on in this world, and I think we'll wait for another 2, 3, 4 more years. I guess we'll find out throughout history what truly went on. But I just think that when you see the Pope coming out against Trump, when you see the Queen of England coming out against Trump, when you see the fact that everyone's like talking about how bad and wicked it is that he wants to build a wall, you got the Pope coming against Trump for building a wall. Have you seen the Vatican? It's got walls everywhere, it's just, but have you ever in your lifetime, you mentioned, growing up through the Reagan era and all, have you ever seen a time where you have so many very, very high level figures in the world coming against a president? I've never seen it. I've never seen more hatred coming across. I remember even before Trump even started kind of getting into it, you'd watch Fox News. They were like they were with Bush. Okay. I mean, you might get a little positivity, but overall, they were pretty skeptical and pretty cynical of Trump. So, again, I'm not coming off as like hardcore Trump supporter. What I'm saying is I'm all 100%. I hope Trump takes it. All I've been saying lately is how crazy is the world going to get? Or sorry, I should say, how crazy is the left going to get when he wins 2020? Because I don't know about you. I believe that Trump's going to take 2020. But also the reaction, the riots, people losing it, having a temper tantrum, I think it's going to go to a whole new level.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. I mean, of course, the system is what it is because I mean, when you look at, all of the elections probably for the last 30 years, and you look at the two choices that you're given.
Sure, but who
you
would
don't
you
really
want?
Get to pick them.
And who would you want? Because people say, oh, you're choosing the lesser evil. But honestly, people that are like, oh, they're all evil, you shouldn't even vote. But honestly, who would you rather right now? Even if you thought both were awful, who would you vote for?
Oh yeah, I mean, if we would have had Hillary, I guarantee this stuff would have kicked off in 2016.
Oh yeah,
and this would have been, I mean, the plan would have been 3 more years advanced, and because she's all involved into all of this stuff, and there, of course, there, with Trump being in power, it is put a kind of. I guess they didn't really expect, him. Like I appreciate Trump for what he's done, but. I personally, I'm not a Trump supporter, but I definitely.
I don't want to get into a Trump. I don't want to get into a Trump talk and make this political. All I'm saying is, bottom line is, and I think people can recognize this, especially as a Christian and morally, because you have to admit he is the first U.S. president that ever spoke at a pro-life rally. I mean,
Yeah.
that was profound. He didn't need to do that. No president, no concern. Bush didn't even do that because it was too controversial. I'm saying Trump did. So let's just take everything aside, military, monetary, morally. Who are you going to vote for? Someone that's actually going to slow the stuff down, right? Maybe the abortions, the this, that, the other thing. Or someone that's just going to railroad it and make it extreme where it's like, hey, let's kill babies once they're born, infanticide, which is what they're after. So I'd say even morally, I still think as Christians, take out the truther hat for a second. As Christians, morally, we have to look at someone as saying, what moral kind of, laws and mandates does this president represent more aligned with God? Would it be Hillary Clinton or would it be Trump? And Trump, obviously, right? Even if he's doing a lot of wicked stuff and he's not, and this whole idea that Trump's Christian, give me a break. I mean, come on, people. Like, they asked him, this is the funniest thing. I don't know if you've ever seen the interview where they're like, hey, do you like the Old Testament or the New Testament? He's like, Testaments, love them. Love both of them. Just love Testaments.
These are the great. I have the best. I have
that?
the best Testaments.
They're the best Testaments. I love them. Love them both. Love Testaments. Love Testaments. I mean, anybody that answers a statement like that, I don't care if you're a Christian for one day, you never answer a statement like that. That's the funny part with Trump. So I don't want to dwell on Trump, but again, you still think that Trump's taking it in 2020. You're calling it right now? You think so?
I do. I think they are trying to do everything they can to empower and Orange Man bad, through the media and everything. Sure. So it may be close, but I don't think. I mean, I can't stand Joe Biden, and there's the third party candidates.
Is he all there? Like, quite honestly,
no.
I think personally, myself personally, if Joe wins, I think he's going to be replaced very soon. I think something's going to come up, some medical thing, and whoever his vice is, because he's already slipped, I think just a week ago, where he said, the vice president I pick, hopefully they're ready to be president on day one. I don't think he slipped or something, but I mean, if you go through the compilation of him talking, I don't think he's all there. I think he's kind of slipping. I mean, we're literally in an election with probably the oldest, running people, in the history for a long time. They're fairly old, both of them, Trump and Biden, right? So, but I don't think he's quite there myself. I mean,
yeah, no, I definitely, and just everything. I mean, everything that you can possibly find out about him. Everything that the people had complained about Trump, you find that 10 times more in him.
Sure.
Well,
the creepy Joe. I mean, I don't think he's gonna be able to live that down. The memes and all that stuff that's gonna be floating around, but he's just so creepy and stuff, right? But anyways, I don't want to get political. You do realize though that overall the world, and my whole thing though is, and maybe that's the play. Okay, let's say from your vantage point, the world's a stage. Trump's going to get in maybe to cause just absolute havoc. But there's no doubt, even if that weren't the case, that we've seen the riots and the protests and all the people going crazy and crying when Trump won, right? And everyone's like walking out of school and protesting and all that. I don't know if you remember that early on there in 2016.
Yeah.
But this time, I mean, they're going to be so prepared. Everyone's going to go out and vote. And then if they lose again, I mean, they are going to lose their mind. Like, they won't be able to stomach the fact of him being in there for another 4 years, I mean, I don't know if it's just going to be impeachment crap going on, for the whole time, but I think it's going to be a lot worse. You can see this escalation, and we can even see this with this double standard protest. It's like, no, churches are closed, don't have businesses open, but protests, great, wonderful, awesome, racial, equality, yeah, right on. You got tens of thousands of people, protesting, and all the media is like, it's awful, it's amazing, right? But then, what was it, a month earlier, you had, people protesting of the fact of their rights, about, opening up again, and it was like, they're dangerous, right? Oh, they're going to kill everyone, So you can definitely see this double standard. It's just so hard to figure out, what is the big play on a federal level or on a New World Order scale, because right now I still see this whole divide happening because you've got independence happening. Even in my own country, you had different provinces acting different than whatever, was coming down federally. They were given the rights. Same thing with the states. There was not one mandate right across the United States. It was like some states didn't even close down.
Yeah.
So I kept telling people, I'm saying, guys, like, if you actually think this is like the New World Order plan that we're seeing right now, they're doing a miserable job of it. Like, really they are, if that was the initial lockdown. Now, if there's going to be future lockdowns, who knows? I mean, we have yet to see about the second wave that, supposedly is probably going to hit in the fall. But getting into all of that, 2020, like you said, you couldn't see it coming. So what do you see that maybe is coming next? Because, I mean, in 2020, I mean, anything can happen.
Yeah, and what I personally think is going on is it's setting precedents for future events. So, we haven't even seen the repercussions from the court systems of what's going to happen when people who lost their businesses go to sue the government, and those are going to go through a court system, then appellate court, and then whatever the judge rulings on those could seriously affect our rights as individuals and shop owners and business owners the next time they do something. So I think what we're seeing, like, really fast, because they're trying to roll something out, right? So they're trying to roll this through, but they have to establish certain laws and things that need to be in place, because right now what they're doing can be technically considered, violations of people's rights. And so this stuff has to go through appellate courts and needs to be ruled on to see, okay, the next time we have a pandemic in 5 years or 10 years or whatever, and they lock us down, they are, the judge rules that it's perfectly constitutional. This is the case. That's just one aspect of it. I think what we are seeing, just like you said, okay, so let's have a scenario here. So we have the liberals who are in Seattle right now, who have literally taken over 6 blocks of Seattle, right?
Yeah. Like they literally, they've taken over the police station, and they kind of just barge their way into City Hall. But have you actually read the list of their demands? And they're talking about spreading into other cities. I mean, they're not just talking about abolishing the police. They want prisons shut down. Oh yeah.
Yeah. And they're completely absurd demands, but you have to understand too, like you just said, say Trump wins this year, right? The precedent has already been set that if you don't like something, now you can go into the city and destroy stuff.
Yeah.
So it's already been set. We have seen people literally cower down to demands that are completely absurd, that really have nothing to do with the unfortunate death of George Floyd and the system that has caused his death and the death of thousands of others, every year. So one of the things I've been just trying to explain to people is we're getting caught up in emotion and getting caught up in what is being fed to us on social media and on the news, and we're not seeing the greater picture, right? Mm-hmm. The same spiritual principle that was affecting the police department and instilling fear in them, that they need to have their hand on the gun at every police stop, and that when they roll through the hood, that every person there is their enemy. That same fear is the same fear that you're seeing on the streets, right? That is happening in the riots. The same anger that affects that police officer when he hears that another police officer of his in a couple cities over was shot. That same anger and hate towards a people group is the same anger and hate that BLM uses to push this whole thing forward towards white communities, right? So it is not the Bible says that we wrestle against we don't wrestle against flesh and blood. We wrestle against principalities and powers. So the people that are doing all of this stuff, they don't have any idea what they're being controlled by. Right. And what's really scary is the amount of just watching the things that happened. And it's not a black thing. It wasn't just black people out there rioting. It was a lot of people. I was seeing 15-year-old kids roll up on their skateboard and busting out windows and stuff, right?
I watched it live for 3 days straight, right when it started happening, because I was just curious and I just got sucked into it. But I was looking at seeing, who are these? A lot of them were just young teenagers. They're just rebellious and vandalizing stuff. And I mean, people say, oh, it was orchestrated by just Antifa, or there were people that were instigating it. Okay, maybe that was the case, but there was a lot that was just reckless behavior. It was just being illegal, looting stuff because, hey, why not? It's free stuff. I mean, they believed.
Or was it though?
Well, exactly. Well, they believed it was owed to them from the man too, right? They're just yeah, right on. Everyone. It was basically mob mentality that took over. And that's what happens every time. If
you look at the number one selling multi-platform video game, online video game, it's Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto 5, where it's literally you are a virtual person going through and causing and wreaking havoc and destroying whatever, right? So I looked at these kids and I went, these kids think that this is a live action Grand Theft Auto 5, right? Yeah. This was part of this whole thing. Like I said, this is a lot bigger picture. There's more things at play than just, this surface level stuff. Yes, there are things that people need, that the police station needs to fix. I have a lot of friends that are police officers that they have one of the highest alcoholic rates. There is no when they deal with the stuff that they deal with every day. I mean, you go to your job and let somebody yell at you for 9-10 hours a day, and then you come home and then do that all over again. After about a month, you're going to break. But there is no psychological help for the police department. So eventually, you're going to get a system that has pushed people to their limits, and then you give them a gun and a badge, and then somebody's going to say the wrong thing to them, and they're going to end up dead. And then we find ourselves in these positions. So yes, there needs to be things that are fixed. I don't disagree with that at all. I mean, there's so many things that I sided with the protesters on, but I also understood that there was a force behind this that is not Antifa It's not the Black Lives Matter movement. Sure. This is a dark spiritual force
sure.
that literally, and I found scripture that I believe it's part of a judgment towards America, honestly.
See, there you go, 100%. I was going to bring that up because I got a lot of controversy when I started bringing it up, and this was early days. Like, this is like coronavirus is just starting to come to America. I mean, I was starting to, I don't know if you remember, I got a lot of crazy hate in the community, but I started saying, hey guys, like, look, something, it's going to get bad. I mean, I said, this is not going to last weeks. This is going to be months, and everyone's laughing at me and saying no. But I came to the realization, spiritually, but also I had other guests on, like Jared Cressman, I had on Josh Peck, I also had Emmanuel Lakonga, the Controversy 7, and all of us discussed different ideas, but really we were all aligned in the fact that this is judgment. I mean, which way you want to look, the fact is, if America is starting to fall and crack, it's because of the sins of the nation, right? And you can say, it's a Christian nation. Well, no, I'm sorry. Like, judgment will come when it gets to a certain point. And again, I said, it's not like it's the plague we're supposed to wipe everyone out. It's not like a wrathful judgment. It's a shaking. It's a wake up, but it's going to be like repetitious. I said, we could honestly be witnessing. You know how you talked about the birth pains in eschatology when Jesus talks about the birth pains? I put a post up early on. I said, could we be witnessing the water breaking event in 2020? Because what happens after the water breaks for a woman, right? It gets more frequent, it gets more intense, but it leads up to the birth, right? So in birth pains, when the water breaks, now it starts really ramping up once that water breaks. But we're seeing so many things happen, and not just to America, we're seeing it worldwide. We're seeing it to the entire world. Because, like, I agree with you, it's spiritual. It's spiritual when all of a sudden a little small town in Alberta. Okay, I live in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. There's a small town of like 2,000 in Innisfil. There is literally Black Lives Matter marches going on there, wanting to abolish the police there. I mean, what is going on when it spreads into Rio and London, and it goes into Australia, and it's spreading to every country of the world, right? I'm sorry, I didn't know it was that big of an issue for every country, especially a town of 2,000, right? That probably have like maybe 3 or 4 black people that live there, and yet all of a sudden they've got all these people. And I would say the majority of people you see in these marches are not black at all; they're white, right?
Yeah,
there's a lot of people.
That was the biggest thing that surprised me. Seeing the predominance white people that were showing up at the rallies.
It is. If you actually do the numbers, depending on the city, but you see a tremendous amount, of white people in there. And again, it was the same thing with the LGBT. I mean, you had a lot of people marching in those parades that weren't gay or transgendered or bi themselves. They were just supporting the fact of saying, I'm standing up, right? Of these people being, hurt and abused and stuff, and I'm standing up for their rights. So in the psychology aspect, if you understand even the beginnings of, when he wrote in the 70s about the homosexual movement and how they were going to take over America, a lot of the thing was he talked about was creating a victimized mentality so that people that weren't even gay themselves would stand up and say, I am going to support you because you don't deserve this. So a lot of this is happening in the Black Lives Matter movement. Antifa, they've been working on college campuses for a long time. I mean, a lot of the professors actually, even in college campuses, are falling under that branch they're finding, with different investigations. But I agree with you. Yeah. This is spiritual. This is big. So the question is, where is this leading to? And question is, where's law and order? Because some states are saying, we're going to come down with the hammer. But it seems right now that where it's predominantly happening right now are specifically more Democratic, more liberal-leaning states. I mean, Seattle, literally the mayor is saying, yep, let them have it. You know what I mean? Yep, maybe we'll get, it's crazy. And you're kind of like, wait a minute, how in the world can this take place where they're building their own country inside the United States of America in downtown Seattle? And it's not that that's crazy enough. Then all of a sudden you start hearing the politicians around it and these leaders, and they're like, yep, we got to give in to them. We got to give them what they want. And it's like, what? Something spiritual is going on because people aren't that ridiculous. Normally you just use a functioning brain and you can realize that something bad is about to take place when all of a sudden you start abolishing police. And then you ask them the question, if somebody needs to call 911, who do they call? Like, who's coming? Who's coming? And they're still going, well, we don't know yet. We haven't got there yet. We're going to abolish the police, but we don't know that far. Seattle actually is so worried now that they've taken over the East Precinct that if they take over the West Precinct, that's where the 911 calls come in. Yeah. So they're like, we don't know what we're going to do if they take over the West Precinct in Seattle, because if people call 911, no one's coming. I mean, that's serious stuff. And meanwhile, Trump's like, you better get in order or I'm coming in. And I don't think Trump is. I mean, unless it gets really bad, he knows the law, he knows the rules. And that's why I think that there's a lot of restraint with Trump. I mean, Trump could have done martial law, coronavirus if he wanted to. He could have mandated all the states, right? He could have said, nope, I'm imposing an executive order. He never did it. So far I'm seeing that there is that freedom there, but it's almost like this vicious experiment. And it's like, what is going to happen to these states that go along with the demands of these insane requests, like getting rid of prisons?
Well, and you have to look at it and say, okay, let's say we get rid of the police departments. All right. And I'm speculating at this point because, I mean, like I said, everything that's happened this far, I was like, what is going on here? But I can still see where they're trying to move things to. Sure. Right. So let's say they take Minneapolis, Minnesota, and they abolish the police departments. If they don't even if they don't abolish them, there are police that are leaving the force by the droves. So even with all of this that's happening, I mean, who wants to work for some place that you're going to be constantly scrutinized and, your life is on the line, all this? People are like, police departments are they're disbanding themselves because of this. I mean, I saw an article of an entire SWAT team that just disbanded, and they said they were done. So, I mean, let's say Minneapolis, Minnesota decides that they're not going to have a police force. They're going to have like public action, right?
Yep.
So let's say they do that. Okay. Do you think that the forces that have controlled the narrative for all this long is just going to let it be like the Wild Wild West there?
No, they're going to do whatever you want. Something else. They're going to, like, if they abolish the police, they're going to have a new police called something different. But the question is, that's going to be more severe. The police actually were the last standing people between the people and the federal government. I mean, really, the police are the good guys here because they're the ones that stand up for people's rights. I mean, people don't understand that the police are really the last line of defense for people's freedoms. And
they're also a standing army of people with choice.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And they do know law and order. Yes. Some of them, they completely don't know their laws, all of that kind of stuff, but they are a standing force that if somebody was coming into your house to kill you, they're going to be there to enforce, the justice that they know. So
of course.
You have to get rid of that. And the next thing that I really see that is coming is if they take Minneapolis and they go that route, then they're going to have to start installing cameras everywhere. Yeah. They're going to have to install some kind of social credit score like we've seen rolled out in China, because people have to self-police themselves in parentheses when it won't be self-policing. It will be, like a credit score.
Which that's I find the funny, only way with that they the whole thing with the mask thing. I never did the post, but honestly, you think the truther community would have loved the mask because facial recognition doesn't work. People say, well, wait a minute, Apple's releasing that new update. The only way that Apple update works with your mask on is because it already knows your face, right? So it will know with a mask. My point is this, though, facial recognition does not work when you're wearing a mask. So you think the truther community would love putting these masks on, but yet they went the opposite direction, right? But I agree with you that facial recognition cameras are going to be installed everywhere. But what do you think is going to happen? Do you think they're going to bring in more of a militarized type police system, more of a UN type system? What do you think's coming there?
Well, I mean, we saw this exact same thing happen with Nazi Germany. Yes. When Adolf Hitler came to power, the first thing he did was disband the police force because they were basically a standing army against his brown shirts. Correct. And then what they did was they instituted the same kind of policy we have already seen happen since 9/11, which was see something, say something. And if you look at China with what China has established with their social credit score system, right now we got a whole bunch of people without a work. But what if the government hates you?
I'd have an awful score, dude. I would have an awful score. I don't know about you, but my score would be so bad. It just wouldn't look good at all.
No, and if you look at the way China had set it up was they in the major cities, and that's all they really care about. They don't, if you think they care about what you're doing in rural Utah, they don't. Right. That's why all of this is happening. Everybody. Okay, yeah. This is one of the things that drove me nuts. Okay, I worked for a major telecommunications company, and they work in 5G. And I saw all this stuff happening with everybody saying 5G. Yes, there are dangers with 5G, but everyone's saying it started coronavirus. That just drove me nuts, because the whole concept of like why it was happening in places where there were 5G is because that's the cities there. You guys want to look at it? That's the exact same cities that had the most damage during the riots too. Right? These are the primary cities where everyone is at. That's why you see a correlation, but correlation is not equal causation. Right? I was on Josh Peck's show and I did a whole video on the 5G stuff, but it's because they can control millions of people on the coastal cities. They don't give a hoot about flyover country. They really don't. You can even see this in there's a Netflix series called well, what was it called? It just escaped me. It was basically an alternate reality of Nazi Germany and China where we lost and they took over the United States.
Yeah.
So Nazi Germany owns that. What is the name of that show?
I don't know, but
Man
like
in the High Castle.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. And I've seen that. Yes.
And that was a Philip K. Dick, that's based on a Philip K. Dick novel, he's what I would call a secular prophet, somebody who has seen futuristic events but has no discernment from God. We talk about secular prophets a lot on our show, but I mean, they literally took over the East and the West Coast, and they didn't care. Basically, the Midwest was, what they called like the wildlands or whatever, where people just ran through there.
Civil War, sorry to interject, but like, do you think Civil War? I have a really strong feeling that we're moving towards Civil War in America. I think the cultural war has already begun, but I do think that if things go unleft checked, or if that's kind of the strategy, I mean, I cannot see another scenario but Civil War taking place.
Well, yeah, I mean, something's got to be done. Okay, so if they start setting the precedents for removal of police force, like I said, they institute. Let's say they build Minneapolis, Minnesota as a smart city, right? Mm-hmm. And they've instituted all of this stuff, and it becomes the flagship for how the other cities should follow suit. It's going to come out and it's going to have these skewed numbers that say we have the lowest crime in the country. Sure. We, this and that. That's how I think that they would start getting it rolled out into other cities. But here's the problem, and this is the biggest problem, and this is what I think we're going to see next. Okay, the biggest problem between this happening and the next step is the amount of guns that Americans own. Right? Okay. So there has to be some event, and like it could be a Civil War type event where,
when's Texas going to be giving up their guns? Explain that.
Yeah.
So there has to be Civil War. I mean, it will be come and take them. You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. America's too armed for them. And people have always been worried about that strategy. And I'm like, I don't think it can ever happen in America in the same way that, like, we're seeing a different scenario. They didn't need to roll out martial law. All they need to do is start taking out the police. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like there's certain ways sometimes where people think it's going to go this direction. And that's the same reason I'm kind of like, I don't think it's going to go down that way, because you just cannot in America say, everyone give up your guns. I mean, they'll be like, come and try to take them. And people will try to take over Texas and see what happens. I mean, it will be a bloodbath. And quite honestly, that's the reason why America was set up the way it was. But also, I don't think America could ever be taken over in that way. Now, could they do it cultural, spiritually? Yes, they could. But I don't think I don't think they'd even have to go that route, because it would just be too blatant and obvious, because it's something that it's part of the whole core of America, is the whole right to bear arms, So I do think...
Sorry. I would say what we have seen time and time again and this is what is kind of rolled out with game theory, what I spoke about earlier. But and we've probably understand it more as what's called the Hungarian dialect, which is problem, reaction, solution. We've seen this time and time again where they don't force you to do anything, but they create a problem, and then the people react, and then they give them a solution. This is the same kind of thing that we're seeing. We saw it with COVID-19 and we saw it with the riots, right? They caused the problem. People react to it and they say, well, we've got a solution for you. So if that were to happen, we'd have to think about a way that something would be rolled out that would cause such outrage towards the gun-toting community that it would give them the right to go in and say, hey, look, or people would just openly give them up because they didn't want to be associated with this particular group. So, they've been trying it time and time again with a lot of the false flag stuff with these attacks on somebody goes into, a movie theater and all this and shoots it up and stuff. Mm-hmm. This is going to have to be a lot bigger than that. And it's going to be applied mostly in the major cities, which they've already gotten to that point in places like New York, Chicago, where it's, it was like one of these, the two of the most gun controlled cities in the country, but we're going to primarily see this in the largest states and cities that hold the most people, because that's who has the biggest sway. And all you need is a handful of squeaky wheels to cause change. And then the media, of course, blows it up to make it look like it's bigger than what it is. And then everybody thinks, well, I need to get on board with this, or I got to. The division thing with the Hungarian dialect is forcing people to choose a side. If you don't choose the right side, then you're a racist or you're a bigot.
It's also the children, though, too. You mentioned the Nazis, and it was the children that started turning on their parents. I mean, it was literally the next generation, and that's who they're going after. If you look at, like we talked about the riots, if you look at the protests, everything that's going on, look at what the age group is, predominantly. You know what I mean? It's the next generation. So they're really, they understand this, that all they have to wait is for generations to die off, and it will instantly start happening over time, because there's that cultural change that's taking place. That spiritual war is happening over, decades, not over a few years. They need to institute something. It will happen, like you mentioned, naturally. People will just gravitate to the idea like, oh, guns are dangerous. We don't need them. You know what I mean? Like as time goes on, more and more people will just, especially when they're indoctrinated by like every single thing in the world, like Hollywood. I mean, if you look at the agenda of just, whether you're watching Netflix or a movie or you're watching television, it doesn't matter what you watch. Those things are all placed in there, right? So when you're completely spoon-fed all of this indoctrination, eventually it's going to have an effect on your mind, especially if you don't have any spiritual protection, right? You're definitely going to be, swayed, certain ways in your idea. Like I always sit there and say when it comes to the LGBT topic, I mean, no one in their right mind would have believed that 2020 would be the way it is back in 1980s. I mean, in the 2000s, I remember with friends, I mean, we could have never pictured how crazy it would have become. I mean, the idea that people would actually get into a debate about what is a man and what is a woman, that you actually could just feel like something and therefore it is. Like today, I feel like a woman. Yeah, but you were born a man. I just feel like a woman. Well, okay, I guess you're a woman. I mean, this is crazy, right? But if you look at all of the Hollywood and everything, it's all in there. So I agree, there's this huge agenda. Speaking of which, Black Lives Matter, if you actually look into their mandates, there's very little to do with race. A lot of the stuff is transgendered, equality when it comes into the, different sexual orientations. I mean, it goes a lot deeper than just a race thing, right? They're after, especially, Antifa. Antifa's another one. They're just straight anarchy, right? They want to rule the world sort of thing. But a lot of their agendas in there are, it's like you see this combination of all these different groups all coming together with a very kind of violent ideology of takeover. And you're seeing it happen. I mean, that's the crazy thing is this is truly happening, not just with the riots. It was astonishing enough seeing them actually burn police stations. And, I watched them ravish. I remember watching Minneapolis for 3 days straight. I mean, it was unbelievable. I don't think the media ever explained how much damage they did, but I was watching kids literally destroy every single shop on an entire block on both sides. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then lighting them on fire. And these weren't like Antifa people. These were kids just lighting fires. You could see it. I was watching it. I'm sure it was happening in other cities. My point is that they were doing so much damage. And you know what? Were there any police? Nope. Not one. The police were so fearful. The only way that police were going to come in is if the firefighters, because the firefighters wouldn't actually come in to put out the fires unless the police were there. So once the National Guard got there, the National Guard would come in to guard the firefighters as they were putting out the fires. And I'm talking like 30, 40 steps away. They were looting stores and the National Guard is right there because their only job was to protect the firefighters. But nothing was going on. Nothing was going on. Now, different cities were doing different tactics, but I remember people saying, oh, they're being violent. I saw nothing but restraint with the police. I saw nothing but patience. They would warn, like I remember in Seattle, actually it was Portland, they warned them 20 times, right? That they were about to, you know what I mean? Use a force and stuff. They asked them to evacuate because, clearly they're being, pelted with all sorts of objects and stuff. They warned them 20 times and then the tear gas came out and the rubber bullets. You know what I mean? But it was when the sun went down that all of a sudden, all this complete anarchy took place. But you see this is like growing and it just, something's different about 2020 in so many ways. But when it comes to this is not normal protest. This is something that I don't believe is going away anytime soon.
No, and I don't either. I think this is setting the precedence. This is the first wave, and this is like, now the next time that somebody has a disagreement with a government policy or something like that, it's going to be another rollout of, hey, you guys, you want to go out and destroy buildings and stuff like that. It's the only way they're going to listen to us because our government showed that, everyone's willing to pander to the demands of especially, and which I understand because nobody wants to be labeled a racist. Sure. But I've seen some beyond crazy pandering from the left. And like I said, these are primarily the cities that we're talking about are primarily the left controlled cities.
Correct.
Most of the mayors of the cities that that had rioting were Democratic controlled. So, we're going to continue to see this because now they know, hey, look, all we got to do is go in there and cause chaos and do whatever, and then we're going to get what we want. So this has set a precedent, just like COVID-19 set a precedent when the government comes out and says, hey, this is bad, this is coming, everybody stay in your house. I was shocked to see how many people actually did it. I mean, this is the same groups of people that I was having talks with that were part of anti-vaccinations, that were part of flat earthers, that didn't trust the government. And then as soon as the government came out and said, hey, your life's in danger, there's a virus coming around, everybody locked themselves in their house, and I'm like, what is going on here, guys? Did we start trusting the government again all of a sudden, or what happened?
Well, we could probably have another show, and we could kind of maybe get into a debate on that. And I say obviously that there was a lot of actions that they took place that were way beyond what they should have done, and there was a lot of hype and all that. But I'm one of the probably only ones around that I believe there's a legitimacy to it. Now, do I believe it is like the bubonic plague? No, I don't. Right? But the idea that it doesn't exist, it's all a hoax. I'm sorry, it's not.
No,
right?
no, I never said that either.
And quite honestly, with the numbers and stuff like that. Now, I agree with you that remember though, through the whole thing, until it got like really to a certain point with certain states, it was way overboard what they were doing. But overall, especially even in my country, it was never a mandate. It was a suggestion, right? And again, I saw this a lot throughout the states. I remember talking to different people and they were saying, no, they're going to lock everyone down. I mean, no, there were a lot of states that said no, right? There were some that did certain steps, other things stayed open, it almost was like a huge experiment in the sense, right? And I guess time will tell who does better, who does not. But this whole idea that it was all fake, I mean, that's wrong. The idea that we needed to actually lock down and shut everything down, that was wrong as well. You know what I mean? But if you look at America, like, if you look at Asia, and this is one reality, whether you believe they're all contrived or not, it seems like everything's coming from China, right? I mean, H1N1 came, all these things came, and you can start looking at the history of those. But America, Canada, the West, I mean, this is brand new. We've never gone through this in our entire life. I mean, I don't think it's ever happened to a case where all of a sudden something was coming in that they were so fearful that something was, we couldn't understand. We were learning about it. So I always take the vantage point of that yes, are they going to take something and take advantage of it? Absolutely. Will they let a crisis go to waste? No. The question is, was the crisis completely manufactured? I mean, I personally think it did come from the lab in China. I really do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I looked at the facts myself. Now, the question was it thrown out into the world as a bioweapon, or was it a oopsie? They were messing around, tinkering with stuff they shouldn't have, and all of a sudden they're by the market, and all of a sudden something happens, because we know that it didn't come from the market because there's no bats even sold at that market, right? But that market is only a few blocks away from where the lab is, right? So they're always tinkering with stuff, and this is another thing that God probably doesn't appreciate is when you're getting into genetics and you're tinkering with something, there's going to be consequences. Do you agree?
Right.
Do you agree?
No.
So my question on the spiritual sense, and we talked a little bit about God's judgment, but I'm looking at all these factors: economy, health, the riots, the breakdown of law and order. This is, Jared Cressman had an eloquent way. I don't know if you ever saw the little segment that I took from the show, and I made a video on it. It was like 12 minutes long, and it's called "Why God Sends Judgments." Did you ever watch that video?
Yeah, I've seen that.
Anyways, it was really well said, but he said, this is why God sends judgments on nations, right? This is what happens. And again, people are saying, are you saying he's sending wrath and he's trying to destroy us all? I'm like, no. He shakes the nations and says, warning, right? Wake up. So in the spiritual sense, we got, like you said, always look at the big picture, but also say, what is God? Because regardless if Satan is the God of this world, he's not fully in control. Now, he's been given that like dominion, but the question is, does he still need to ask permission? I mean, Job is a good example of that, right? He's still on a leash. So the question is whether God does it or he uses evil men or whatever, it's still God choosing to either allow it or he does it. But this whole idea that everything that we're experiencing in the world, and specifically the United States, this is happening because he's allowing it to happen. The question is, why is he allowing America to be ravished so hard? Because even the economy, if people stop and think that if you think that the stock market is going crazy, when all of a sudden they've got the hugest job losses ever and companies are going bankrupt, it's one of those things where we're headed towards some very serious pain financially, morally. All these things are coming to America. The question is why? The question is why from the spiritual sense. I mean, they're fighting this war, but overall, if he's sending judgment to a nation, what's our response? But the question is why? Why do you think now?
Well, so my whole, when I first brought this up, I asked everybody. I said, I believe that this is judgment. I said, if anybody wants to disagree with me and wants to stand up for their city and stand in the gap and say, my city doesn't deserve God's wrath, if you can do that, then I want you to stand up and raise your hand, because I want somebody to tell me that their city is not guilty of murder. Their city and their towns and their states aren't guilty of abortion.
Yeah.
Their city and towns aren't guilty of supporting things that God thinks are an abomination.
Yep.
You know, like, there are so many things. There is no way that you can stand up and say my city doesn't deserve this, because if you believe in God at all, you have to understand that our cities are just like Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what God showed me in the midst of this is that Abraham, who is the model of Torah, right? It says he was righteous in his walk.
Yep.
When God came to him with the two angels, his two witnesses, and said, I'm going to go over there and destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. What did Abraham do? Abraham prayed and like wrestled, kind of, he went back and forth. He was making deals with God. Like,
he was making
God,
deals.
Look,
if I can find 50,
yeah.
if I can find 30, if I can find 10, and God's like, okay, 10. If I can find 5,
Right.
okay, 5. It's like, my
right.
goodness.
And he was, so, I mean, he was fervently like just wanting to God, can I save the city?
And who's doing
right?
that?
And
who's doing that in
exactly
2020? Who's doing that? You know what I mean? We're looking at all this stuff and we're doing all this research, but who's honestly on their knees kind of interceding and saying, please, show mercy. You know what I mean? Like, the whole idea that God doesn't like send judgments is so crazy to me. It's just like Christian truthers are at a point right now where no matter what happens in the world, I don't think they would believe it's from God ever. God could actually send a plague and they would think it was something else. Like, he could send something crazy and they'd say, well, that's a bioweapon. Or, all I'm saying is it's weird how the Christian truthers have turned to everything as wicked men. God does nothing anymore, right? Now, I agree, God can use wicked men for his purposes, but this whole idea that God isn't sovereign above all his creation, and yes, he sends blessings and he sends curses in that sense, but he also sends, it says, he sends the locusts, he sends the plagues, he sends this. And I mean, if you look scripturally, you find nothing but scriptural support right through the Bible that God is the one that actually judges nations. And nations fold as far as empires, and America is an empire, right? But I believe in the history books, it will be the shortest lived empire in the history of the world. Because it's only like over, a couple of 100 years? Rome was like 1,000, right? Greece was like, in the whole scheme of history, I think as far as a superpower, I think it will be a very short-lived superpower. Now, can they change that course? If people are interceding and they were actually trying to change, I think that things would change, but I think his people are the one. I said this before. I said, God's sending judgment. People are like, yeah, it's wicked, it's wicked. Guys, he's sending judgment to you as well. He's sending it to the church, you and me, everyone. He's sending it to all of us. Wake up. We have a job to do, and it's time to get serious. If you weren't serious before about like the end times and witnessing and getting out the gospel, this is the time to sit there and say, time is short. But also, look how crazy things are getting. Can you imagine things getting 50 times more wicked? 1,000 times more wicked? Like, it just seems like, at what point does it get so wicked where you're like, I want to scream out, I want to cry out to God and say, please forgive my country. Please forgive my city. Please forgive my town. God does listen to prayer. He does actually act on that. But I see nothing of that really within the truther community. It's all this. It's all wicked men. It's the New World Order. It just seems like they're giving all this praise to all this intelligence. I'm like, listen, this is my theory on this. I don't believe that man is sophisticated enough to unleash anything to know for sure that it is going to hit every single country on earth. How could you actually possibly imagine systematically trying to plan that? Let's just say that it's real, for example, right? And even if it was minimized, how do you plan something to actually touch every single country on earth? Literally, it's shaking every nation on earth. So I say all these judgments, same thing with these protests. Now it's shaking up all the countries of the earth. I mean, these are like, some of them are peace-loving. New Zealand, they're doing protests in New Zealand over Black Lives Matter and Antifa and stuff. I mean, it is spiritually spread across the world. And for the first time in history, we're seeing more stuff happen simultaneously in more countries than ever in history before. Before it was like in this country, in this country. I mean, even with the Spanish flu, it only hit like a few countries, right? Sure, it was way more potent. But my point is, have we ever seen something that affected this many countries? I mean, even if you think it's minimized, it shut everyone down. And people say, well, it's all part of the plan. Excuse me, Iran? Why would Iran be part of the plan, right? Yeah. Why would all these countries, be part of it? And then also, if this was the plan, then what was the end game? What did they get accomplished? And people say, well, they got people to be compliant. Okay, but everything's all opening up again, right? So what was the end game overall? And you were explaining before the spiritual, nature. And I want you to go into detail on that with what you see, because there's a lot of confusion. A lot of people are seeing all this stuff happen. What really is going on, but what can we see kind of happening in the next few years? Because it's escalating at a rapid pace.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, I definitely agree that this isn't over, and what we are kind of seeing is something that we saw with like Madame Blavatsky and a lot of these people who were in the occult that are the founders of modern day occultism. What they had what was called externalization of the hierarchy,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
and what this is indoctrinating people into the occult. So I mean, I'm sure probably everybody who listens to your show is familiar with MK Ultra at this point.
Yeah.
And what we are doing is on a grand scale being put through indoctrination and mind control. I mean, they have to torture you and put you into a state of fear, shock, panic, basically to get you. I mean, that's if you study MK Ultra at all, like what we are going through are the stages that they institute on a normally a base level for one person, and I believe that that's what they're doing right now. The waves of emotions and the waves of where the chaos in the information alone, where it's like wear a mask, don't wear a mask, wear a mask, don't wear a mask. Like anytime you're investigating anything, the information is changing so rapidly every day that it's confusing people, and it causes shock to the system. Not to mention the panic of people's, I mean, we've seen this happen over and over again where there's like no safe place to go. Like movie theaters, you can get shot up, and now with the COVID-19, you really can't go anywhere. They have now embedded that in your mind that no place is safe, nobody is safe, nobody you can be around
as long as you're protesting. As long as you're protesting, you're
right,
completely safe.
Right.
COVID actually really loves when you stand up for, brutality, against people through the cops. It won't affect you. So you can get together in mass numbers as long as you're standing on those issues. Yeah. But if you dare want to open your business or go to church, nope.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, we've seen God told us all this stuff in the scriptures, though. Yeah. It says that towards the end that everything that is good will be considered bad and everything that is bad is considered good.
Sure.
I mean, the love of many will wax cold. I mean, I could go through a plethora of things. Jesus himself even said that we will see plagues and famines and rumors of wars, which means, we will hear pretend wars and wars.
Yeah.
And then nation versus nation. Well, if you look that up, it's ethnos in the Greek, which is where we get our root for ethnic or ethnic or ethnicity. So that could be implied of a, ethnic nationality versus another ethnic nationality. I mean, there are so many things, but Jesus said in all of this, though, I mean, he gave us warnings and stuff and promises and said, look, don't fear, trust the Father, be joyful, because when you start seeing these things, it's just the beginning of the birth pains, but I'm coming back right after that. This is, these are the, don't be deceived. There were all kinds of stuff that he gave us warnings about, and we're kind of just throwing them all out the window, But whatever we're going to see next, of course, is going to be a shock to the system. But the only way you're going to be able to see through the nonsense, the things that they're bombarding with us, is turn your TV off and get in prayer with God. You need the Holy Spirit to guide us through these times, because they're coming up. Like I said, this is all game theory, and I believe that they've figured out the truther community, and so they're doing things to circumvent us. Just like we've seen a plethora of on social media. If anybody else is a part of social media and the truther community, the amount of disinformation that was dumped in the laps of the community, it just blows my mind.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring this point up for sure on the show, because I want to implore people to please try your best to research anything that you're going to share, any meme, any picture, any new breaking news. Just look and find out as much credibility as you can, because like Aaron's going to explain, there is a lot of disinformation, and maybe you can explain why you think that's the case, and what the consequences are for getting all of this stuff circulating.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said just a little while ago when I was touching on it, where previously in the truther community, we had to spend a lot of time and effort to show our work and show, hey, this leads to this and this leads to this. I mean, it's just like, it's almost a science, and the fact that we have to be able to repeat the process, show the truth, and let others be able to do the same thing. So it was always a difficult process, which I know that you understand fully because of everything you've had to do in the flat earth community. When you see an abundance amount of information that gets dropped in your lap through something like Q or Facebook, you should start questioning that immediately, because somebody is not just out there going and investigating it, and then they go, because I've never met a truther that goes, okay, I'm going to go investigate this. I'm going to go, and he's looking it up, and he's like, okay, I found out this links to this, and this police officer is not the actual police officer. He didn't get arrested. I'm going to go make a meme about it. There has never once been a truther that has ever done that. Yeah. So we have to question ourselves, where is this stuff coming from? When we talked about Intel or like COINTELPRO earlier, which just talks about people that are interjected into different networks because they are used as instigators or accumulators of information, we have seen a complete shift in the abundance of information or what's called disinformation that has been dumped into the communities that people just eat up. I mean, because it takes all responsibility out of your hand, especially for a lot of people who feel. I know that I've seen an explosion in the truther community, people who are interested in it, because with everything that happened with COVID-19 and now everything that's happening with this, there's a lot of people who, well, even with Q, because there were so many people that were trying to investigate, JFK's assassination, all of this stuff, and Q seemed to like be the one source to go find everything. Because you could go spend years and years. I mean, diving into a conspiracy theory now is like jumping into a stack of needles looking for a needle.
And Q spirituality is really intriguing. Speaking of Q, getting into the spirituality, the recommended like books and the reading on those boards and stuff. If you actually start diving into that, you find a very kind of new age Christ consciousness emerge, right? And you got to, as a Christian, you got to be very careful, especially if you think this is great. He's a Christian. He's mentioned God a couple times or whatever. All I'm saying is, if you really research it, you find out a very Christ consciousness emerges. You get into some really interesting literature that's being prescribed in a lot of these boards and stuff, and it's not Christian at all. It's the exact opposite. I mean, this whole thing's been going on for a long time. This, right, left, good, bad paradigm. White hat, black hat. It's like the good people are going to win. I read the Bible. I don't see that taking place, period. Where all of a sudden there's going to be victory. So I'm always perplexed. It's like, do these people study eschatology? Like, where do you find that all of a sudden all the evil is going to be wiped out from the earth? Like, it's just,
I would say, I mean, we see the same thing with most of modern Christendom. It's a lot easier for your pastor to teach you how to read the Bible than you to actually read it yourself.
Sure, but the pastor wouldn't believe in Q. He'd be like, no, actually, it's going to get more and more wicked. That's why I'm trying to preach and you guys to wake up and be prepared. I'd say even the average church wouldn't ever think that all of a sudden good is just going to, it's going to trump evil on the earth and we're going to have utopia without Christ. Right? Without Christ, again, that's the key word, not with Q. It's like with Q, we're going to have utopia. We're going to have a paradise on earth because all the evil ills of the earth are going to be stamped out because he's going to do it through Trump.
Well, and again, this is like we go back to the game theory where they understand the psychology of humans. They understand us better than we understand ourselves, especially in large mobs. There's mob mentality psychology, and then there's individual psychology. It always reminds me of the I can't remember which episode it was, but I think it was the second episode of Men in Black, where they're at the very end of the show, and he sits him down on the bench. He's talking like the K to J or whatever, and he's like, people are smart, or a person is smart. People are dumb. Was it dumb? Silly, wild animals, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, but they understand the psychology of groups of people, and I think this has a lot to do with the AI, them feeding them information, and then them, actually creating maps and alternate like virtual realities. From everything I studied with D-Wave and stuff, they're talking about, they're putting in information, it's building an environment, and then it's a mock virtual world of everything that we're doing, and they're able, by our actions, like if we were a bunch of little ants, see what we would do, and then they're able to predict how the majority of people are going to react to a specific situation. This is stuff that they've been doing for probably several decades at this point now.
Sure.
And so when they look at a community, they understand, hey, if these people are causing us problem, we've got to break them up. We've got to cause division. We've got to go in and do this. And so we have to understand that the enemy is acting and is active to try and get us to look really bad. Because if truthers are actually doing something for the kingdom and waking people up and opening people up and exposing things, then what's the best way to do that? What's the best way to ruin that group? is to make them look like a bunch of silly idiots.
Yeah, yeah.
And the best way to do that is to just dump a bunch of information that's, absolutely ridiculous and let people post it around. And now your friends, especially with everything that happened with George Floyd, I saw so much stuff that was just completely repetitively dumped out there.
Like George Floyd doesn't exist. Or he never died. Or all I'm saying is sometimes you got to look at like what kind of credibility will it be from someone that's seeing that? Like, are you ever going to have access to be able to talk to them? Or are they going to think you're completely off your rocker? Now, people could say the same excuse. They said when Flat Earth came along, it was disinformation. It was to make other truthers look stupid. Yeah, but the only difference was that you could research it yourself, test all things, research the claims made. No one went further than that point though, right? So what we're saying on this is when you see something, test all things, test that image, test that claim that's saying that, George Floyd and whatever that guy's name, they're one and the same, right? There's no credibility.
No, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, stuff like that, right? But again, there's a whole, it just seemed like, interesting enough, there was more stuff dumped when George Floyd died that I had ever seen prior leading up to it. It just seemed like just all this information came out, right? Now, the one thing I did post on, and I was very careful what I posted on, which was, verified, was the fact that it wasn't that they knew each other. The fact is that they worked security detail, right? One was there, one there, throughout time, they worked, security detail. That was something that was a fact. It had no relation whatsoever. When I did conferences, I hired off-duty police officers, right, to work my events as security. Now, it doesn't mean that somebody inside my security in there knew the police officer. It's just they were working there. So that was really the only thing. But some of the things, were true. But so much of the stuff, it got so bizarre, Then they started looking into the coffin and all this kind of stuff. They're like, oh, it's closed casket. Right? Oh, he must be hiding and all this kind of stuff. You got to be careful, with what you share, And quite honestly, you could think whatever you want, that it was all contrived and all that. But here's the thing. You remember, and this is an interesting thing too. You remember the 75-year-old? I've yet for anyone to explain to me, wouldn't it have been a million times better if that was a 75-year-old black man? Can you imagine how much of their agenda they would have been accomplished if that was an elderly black man that they pushed and he hit his head and he had trauma or whatever. They're saying right now that he's got brain injury or whatever. But my point is, why a white guy? You're doing a race war protest and now you're going to stage something to really get people all up in arms. People would have lost their ever-loving minds if that was a black man. Now, I would have used a black man. If it was me and I'm staging something and I want to just get everyone going absolutely ballistic. So the whole idea that, there was a ton of people that knew him as an agitator. He'd been in a lot of protests. And again, I'm not going to get into all the different theories. My point is, when you see something, rather than just jumping on it and start sharing it, really research it. Just take one thing and research it, because you might be able to have, insight that you could talk to other people and say, hey, look, I really looked into it. Unfortunately, I know you were talking to Val or whatever, that he's created WokeJournalist.com.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to start doing that. And I shared a link, not from his source, but from somebody else. I don't know if you saw it on my Facebook, but I posted it where he went through all these different myths, and it goes through all these different images that are, and then the kind of the research that, unfortunately, this is wrong, this one was right, this one's right, this one's wrong. But a lot of them were wrong, right? When they started kind of overlapping and stuff. But it just seems like everyone kind of fine-tunes everything. And while you're doing that, this whole agenda is moving forward, and you're concentrating on the fact of it's really this guy. It's not really him. And it's is it really relevant in this discussion of they're moving forward with this agenda, and people aren't waking up to the fact of other things that we're trying to, wake them up to. I think more on the spiritual front, how do we wake people up and kind of show them the bigger picture?
Well, yeah. If we go back and just kind of look, I just want to explain to people. Within 2 days of that incident happening, we had more information dumped out there. The guy, that they hadn't even released his autopsy reports or anything like that, and we literally had so much information that was dumped out. And I've just been trying to tell people, with everything that was going on then, it wouldn't have even mattered at that point. Let's see, it happened on a Monday. I think by Wednesday, everything started exploding. By that Thursday and Friday, there were riots popping up all over the country. Yeah. At that point, it wouldn't have mattered if they grabbed those 4 police officers out of their homes and hung them in the streets. It would have not stopped a single one of those protests.
Well, it didn't, because they all got arrested. Even when they arrested Derek or whatever, charged him, they didn't care. They wanted all 4, right? And then when all 4 or whatever, it was I was telling people, I'm like, guys, they're not going to stop. Like this is beyond the point of like, we just want them all arrested. That's all our demands. No, it's not. They're going to have a heck of a lot more demands than just having those 4 officers arrested.
Yeah. And I mean, that was my kind of point. So if they would have drugged those 4 officers out and killed them in the streets, and that wouldn't have changed a thing, what does a meme being shared on Facebook, do you think that that's going to change anything?
Yeah.
It wouldn't have stopped anything. I mean, we literally beat a dead horse for 2 weeks, and it didn't change anything. All I saw it do was it if you had any friends who were black in the black community, in the African American community, who were maybe teetering on becoming a Christian, maybe teetering on looking for something while they were in fear, while they were in panic, and they were being spiritually attacked, and you could have reached out to them and taught them what, you know, hey, you can find freedom from all of what you're feeling right now in Jesus, right? But
absolutely. Sorry, we're coming to a close here at Revolution Radio. Okay. I got my thing here. Just hold on for a second. Thanks for getting in. It's loud. Don't know what's going on, but we'll get rid of that. So anyway, sorry to interrupt there. We were getting the break message from Revolution Radio. So we're off. We're on YouTube now. Continue on.
Okay. All right. So that's over then on that aspect there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. I just heard all the noise and
we're
everything.
On YouTube. So. Yeah, we're on YouTube. Yeah. We didn't get the break like I told you. Wouldn't happen. But then it looks like something's there because I could start hearing, the music come in. So I just basically got off with Revolution Radio. But yeah, we're on YouTube here now for the after show.
Cool. All right. But yeah. So what I was just saying is that ultimately it affected our outreach, especially to those people who were in pain, who were suffering, who had lost other family members, to police action. I mean, if you were posting something out there that seemed racist and insensitive, it was, you may not have thought it was, but it may have been affecting somebody that you may have been friends or family members that did. But I saw so much division, and then that spurred other things where I saw people that were sharing memes and talking about all lives matter. And what one of Antifa's tactics is what's called doxing. It's where if somebody says something racist or bigoted or whatever, then they now take a picture of it. Yep. They take a picture of where you work from, and then they send it to your you're representing that company.
And it's crazy. And that's another thing we should maybe comment on is how insane it's getting right now, where you can actually get fired from your job. I mean, I don't know if you read the report on that soccer player. I think it was out of LA or something like that. His wife posted something. His wife. And he was let go. He didn't post anything. His wife posted something in Czechoslovakia or whatever. I don't know. But anyways, the fact was he got fired. He got let go for what his wife posted. I mean, we're living in a day and age where you could actually get fired from your job for something your family did.
Right. This is the thing. This is exactly what I'm talking about. We are already seeing the institution of what the China social credit score is, because part of that China social credit score, and it's actually been rolled out and you guys don't even notice it. I mean, if you go to a restaurant and you get bad service there and you go on Yelp or something like that and you give them a 3-star review, or you take an Uber and you don't really like the guy who drove you and you give him a marking that's negative, you are part of the China social credit score system. Correct. It has already been initiated. They just haven't rolled it out on large scale in the United States.
Yep.
So what we are seeing is this is just another form of the see something, say something. They did the exact same thing like we were talking about in Nazi Germany, where they are turning. I mean, and the Bible even says this, that father, son will turn against father and daughter against mother, right? Yep. We are seeing this exact same thing starting to roll out, and this is setting a precedence, right? So now next time...
Sorry to interrupt, but you got these TikTok stars now that are screaming at their parents, calling them effing racist, and then afterwards they'll be like, I want to leave this effing house, I hate my parents, and they're being celebrated. Celebrities are retweeting them out or whatever. They're sharing their content because they're like right on, standing up. But exactly, it's the generation. Satan always knows to go for the children. I mean, everyone always understands that principle. Get the children. If you get the children, you get the future.
So then we will continue to see these kinds of things rolled out where the next time, like I said, that somebody says something in your news feed, or you say something that is, like say somebody attacks you for your faith, right? They will do this. They will target people and say, hey, I see that you're a Christian. What do you feel about homosexuality? And then you go and you say, well, I think it's abomination. Boom, they screenshot it. Yep. They're sending it to your work, and now you're getting fired from your job, and you've lost your house, all kinds of stuff, all because you had a belief structure. Yep. Remember, biblically, it says that they will hate us for his name's sake.
Correct.
Because they have to build a system that is going to make us the enemy. And so this is what we are going to continue to see. It's going to continue to keep pushing. I can't exactly lay it down for you because, I'm not John, but I can see where it is going. And I can see, how they're going to try to get people, because again, I said it's the Hungarian dialect. So they have to create something.
That's why the race war, inciting this whole thing is not going to work with Christians, because all Christians would stand against racism. I mean, they would say, no, it's wrong. I mean, we're all created equally, in the image of God. You know what I mean? We're all basically men, women, one race kind of thing in that sense. So, it's not going to work. That's why I knew that there'd be deeper agendas, because, if they were spiritually coming against the church or the body of believers, they're not going to use race. Because what person is actually going to sit there and say, oh yeah, my Bible says that black people are, of the devil? They're not, They say Jesus loves everyone, right? They're all precious in his sight, right? Racism is horrible, So that's what I'm saying. It had to be deeper. There had to be more agendas there to come against, to really hate the Christians. What are they standing for? But sure enough, you start looking in deeper, and again, they're all about transgendered and, and about all this LGBT stuff and all that. That's where they're going to get the Christians, right? Oh, you're hateful, you're a bigot, they like to throw out these words, right? I'm like, no, I'm not saying I hate anyone. I just believe it's wrong, right? Just like I think that murder's wrong, or that adultery's wrong. I mean, heck, fornication's wrong, Having sex outside of marriage is wrong. What is wrong in today's age, being able to tell someone, I think it's wrong? I mean, it's become so horrible that you would dare tell me you think I'm wrong. But this is even seeped into like truthers or to any community where it's like we're in a day and age where we don't want to offend someone. How can it be offending? Have a discussion. We have different belief systems. So what, right? But we still can love people.
Right. Absolutely. And I think, and Paul hits home on this a lot when he talks about love, right? Ultimately, let the world's going to do what it's going to do. And I'm all about the truther community and finding out stuff and informing people. I'm all about it. I've been a part of it for a long time, and we will continue to be a part of that because of our show and everything like that. But what we are trying to teach is we're trying to outreach to not only the Torah observant community, but also the Christian community, and trying to talk about bridging the gap and trying to talk about how we can love each other, because God says that they will know us by how we love each other. This is what Jesus spoke. Yeah. And so we need to start loving each other, and we need to start expressing that out into the world, because right now they look at us as the enemy, and they continue to look at the enemy, or look at us like the enemy. And we, as long as we keep playing the game that they're trying to shove down our throats in the truther community, we're going to still keep looking like the enemy, right? They're always going to hate us, right? But that doesn't mean that we can't stop loving them, because, and I've said this several times, when all of this stuff starts happening, if we're moving towards the end, right? I may not see it in my generation, but it may be my children's, right? But if we're moving towards that, we're going to see a lot of changes happen in our lifetime. And the thing is, some of the people that you might think are enemies right now, God may pull on their heartstrings. When the Christians start being persecuted, you're going to see a great falling away, but you're also going to see an abundance of people coming from the other side who maybe hated Christians, who maybe despised Christianity, but see the sacrifice of somebody who dies for their belief, and it pulls on their hearts, right? Oh, God knows the hearts of people. We don't. We only see people in a snapshot of their life. And so you may look at somebody right now and say, that's the enemy, he hates me, but he may be saving your life in 5 or 6 years, and he may be a Christian brother by then. You have to really be careful, and we have to really be steadfast in what God has called us to do. And I mean, if I can say to anything in the truther community, especially when it comes to this, is if we're not doing anything, if we're like, you can expose all kinds of stuff and you can put all that out there, but if you don't do it with love, it means absolute squat.
Yeah, that's the key thing there. Yeah, no, that's definitely very key to say. I mean, I've been saying that for, many shows is we have to love on people, man. You know what I mean? Like, no one wants to be yelled at and told they're a sinner and they're going to hell and all that. I'm not saying that these things don't apply, but it's the right time, the right context, right? I mean, just bashing people on social media or saying this thing, it doesn't go very far at all with people. That's something that we have to look at is really like loving on people, because, people will see that. That's what will be the change. And I'm not talking about like, oh, love, like, the LGBTs would say that everything is permissible under love, I'm talking about true agape love, right? selfless love, in the sense that, God sent his only begotten son that died for us, right? Anyone that would believe in him would have eternal life. I mean, that is true agape love, right? That's when you love on your enemies. They're spitting on your face, and Jesus is sitting there saying, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Let's have that prayer. I mean, these people are blinded, right? Sometimes it's interesting. We get so hateful, we get so mad, I should say hateful, but we get so upset and frustrated and all that. But really, if you think about it, why don't we have the prayer, Father, forgive them, they do not know what they do, but mean it. Don't say it condescendingly, like, oh, forgive them, they have no idea what they're doing. It's like, honestly, they don't. Please wake them up, Father, like wake them up, bring them to life, allow them to see, the evil, the ills, these type of things. But yeah, it's something, it's like a heart thing. And you got to get to that point where you look at the bigger picture and you say, wait a minute, what is the Great Commission? What are we here for? Right?
Yeah,
what
absolutely.
ultimately are we here for? And it truly is about the gospel. It's about reaching people with the good news about Jesus, right? It's honestly that he is the only way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through him. That is really all it's about. And whatever you're doing, whatever ministry, whatever you're doing in life, that should be your core focus on anything, right? And again, you don't need to beat people over the head with it. You just have to love on them. Obviously tell them if they reject it, fine. Find the people that are going to desperately want to hear what you have to say. They're out there. The sheep will hear my voice and will come to me. My sheep will hear my voice, right? So it's really clear in Scripture where we kind of get frustrated. We're always working on like our dad or our brother and stuff. It's like, look, man, sometimes it doesn't happen even within family. Pray to God to bring the right person to that person, It happens. God does answer prayers, but sometimes you're not going to be the one to actually harvest. You might be the one that plants the seeds. And all you have to do is plant those seeds. But honestly, think about in the term of like eternity, what we're doing here on earth, honestly, is literally being measured. And what an amazing opportunity it is to be ambassadors for Christ, literally vessels in his name being used by him for the purpose of his glory. I mean, wow. And we say, oh, it's getting wicked, it's getting evil. Think about the times when babies were being born, that any firstborn male baby was going to be put to death. That's a crazy time. People say, I don't want to have kids today, Oh, it's a crazy world. I don't want to have any kids. Can you imagine throughout history how many horrific times there were to have children and people still had children, He said, be fruitful and multiply, right? Trust God. Have faith in him. I mean, he's watching over you. You have nothing to fear. Nothing. Satan himself has no absolute at all power against you, right? Nothing can pluck those out of his hands that he's kept, right? So it's like we have to have that kind of idea no matter what we're doing in life, no matter what we're seeing in the world. We're here as the light in a dark world. We're here as the salt in this world. It's like that's the important part to understand with all of this is we literally are called for his purposes. And we're a peculiar people. We will be different, but honestly, we will be powerful in his name. And the very fact that we actually get to accomplish his will, like he actually uses us for his purposes to bring about his glory, to me is just such a profound thing. It's like, wow, God, you chose me. Why? I have no idea, right? I'm nothing. And yet you chose me to do these things all in your glory. And without you, nothing could be, accomplished. And it's just amazing. And I find that this time, 2020, this whole pivotal point in history, because there is no doubt in my mind, no one can actually win this debate. We are literally at a pivotal point in history. This is profound. This is bigger than 9/11 on how many things are going to change after 2020, right? This is a huge pivotal point in the history books. We are all participants in it. And if you're called and you're one of his, honestly, pray and ask what you are supposed to do in this time. And quite honestly, it's always going to come back to you. Have mercy on those. Love on people, right? Don't, and again, that's what keeps coming back to me and all this research and all talking. It comes back to the point of like, you've got a huge task. I'm calling my people out. I'm shaking everyone up and saying, hey, it's time, not to be complacent, not to get lazy. It is serious time. And if people don't understand how crazy things are getting, maybe it's going to take, more fires or riots or martial law or whatever comes. It doesn't matter what comes. We have all victory in Christ's name. We have nothing to fear. And quite honestly, we'll be powerful through any type of force that comes against us.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I just want people, if you're going to be a part of this community, if you feel called, do something. Like right now, I mean, I really feel a calling that like just after this last Passover and then into Pentecost, I really feel like God is calling. He's like changing things for people and calling a boldness from people. I mean, I think one of the most it made me so happy to see. I guess I could just put it that way. I saw an article about them baptizing people, and like people were coming to salvation in like this community in the spot where George Floyd was killed. The Christian community actually went out there and was using this time, in different cities, and they were preaching the gospel to people. People needed it.
Yes.
I mean, there were people that are in fear, they're anger. The only thing that gets you out of that paradigm is having a relationship with the Messiah, and turning over all of our transgressions to him, right? We understand that from this side, but the world doesn't. They're searching for answers and can't find it because the news is giving them everything else but the truth, right? Or, two different opposing truths. And, they're not getting the answers there. They're seeking for truth. There's an entire world of people that are seeking for truth, and we have it. And I feel like we are like the, in general, I'm not saying this, specifically, but we are like the master gave the talents to the different people, and we're the one that took the talent and buried it in the ground because we knew our master was, we can make him mad, and I don't want to lose this talent, so I'm just going to bury it in the ground. We're not utilizing it for the way God wanted us to use our talents, and I want to see everyone who is being called, like I said, look where I'm at right now, and just a year ago, God was calling me to do this, and I was like, well, God, maybe whatever. Well, if God wants you to do something, it's going to happen.
Yep.
I
agree.
mean?
No, I agree.
You've already signed a contract.
Yep.
You've already signed a contract.
Look at Jonah. You can try to run away all you want, but eventually he preached to Nineveh. That's exactly true. I mean, this is a controversial topic when you start getting into predestination versus free will. But really, ultimately, if God is calling you to do something, it will get done. I mean, even within your own choices, it will still be accomplished, right? Nothing that he sets out comes out back void. Can you imagine him going to Noah and Noah saying no? And he's like, oh, okay, I'll go find someone else, right? Like, it just wouldn't happen, right? I mean, you could pick anyone in the Bible. People say, well, that's the Bible. It happens today. And if you have a calling on your life and you feel that urge, I don't care what it is or how outlandish it seems, do it, right? You're going to end up doing it anyways. I mean, people would say it all the time, like, if God called me to go to Africa and I didn't want to, eventually you're going to end up in Africa preaching the gospel, if that's what he's called you to do. You can fight and kick and scream all you want. You can maybe end up in prison, and eventually, I mean, I used to have a pastor, and his story was he was being called to become a pastor, and he was so scared of public speaking, and he's like, no, and he had this big calling on his life, and he's like, you know what, I'm going to appease God by doing the most dangerous thing I could possibly imagine in ministry, smuggling Bibles into Bulgaria. So he started smuggling Bibles into Bulgaria, for a couple of years, I think it was. Well, eventually he got caught and he got put in prison. Well, finally prison, he surrendered. And he said, fine. But it literally took prison for him to come out. And he's a powerful preacher, really, really great guy. But the moral of the story was he thought he would appease him by doing something different, something more risky, something like really, cutting edge. I'm going to smuggle Bibles. I mean, that's going to appease him. That's going to be amazing to do, getting Bibles into people that can't get a Bible. Wow, that's great. Well, it wasn't good enough, right, for God. God was like, I want you to preach the word, right? I want you to share the gospel this way. So, that's what happened. I've seen this so many times in people's lives where they try to fight it or say, I can't do it. But again, he will give you the power to do it. He'll give you the way. You got to remember, he runs it all. He can accomplish all things, and all things can be accomplished through Christ. There's nothing for you to fear, no matter what you see. Uncertainty, you have the rock. You have the truth. People always talk about truthers. Well, really, in a sense, truth is Jesus. I mean, it's him. It's all found in one. And if you have that, you have truth. You don't need any more. You don't need to research more truth. You don't have to do this. It's all good pursuits, but really it's not the be-all end-all in the sense of like the main truth that you need to get to people. Because I don't care if people wake up to the reality that NASA's lying to them. If they don't come to a relationship with Jesus, they're in big trouble when they die. Big trouble. Oh, you're going to be sitting there like, I knew they were lying to hide you. And he'll say, sorry, like it doesn't matter. Like, so when we talk in truther type talk, it's like that is the most important. So whatever you're talking to people about, the most important is not that George Floyd was a crisis actor or that this was a hoax or Sandy Hook or whatever you want to say. You have to get them to understand how important it is that they come to understanding who the Messiah is, the one that loved them, that died for them. This is the most important thing. Everything that we do should always lead back to him.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And like, again, I don't know how many times we could talk about that, but if you are involved in and you want to know more as far as things that are coming out and truther information and stuff like that. Val, we talked about his site earlier. Val Owens, who has a site called WokeJournalist.com, and it is going to be the equivalent of a Christian truther, like Facebook, fact checker. He's employing a lot of people like myself. I think he wants to reach out to you about some flat earth stuff. I mean, some of the best known names in the communities to write up articles and to fact check and do truth stuff. And
which is going to put a lot of, onus on the people to be really careful with what the research is, because once you put it out there, that you're a trusted source, you know what I mean? So that'll be,
right.
That's why I'm saying is if you're going to research something, you got to take your time with it. You can't just research something because you watched a video and then you throw something up. I mean, if you're going to research something, you got to take your time on it, especially if you've given a task on a specific, image. Is this image real, right? Or is this claim real? Well, you got to do your research enough. That's why I think, having a tool like that is good, that people are assigned different things, because it's just too tough with so much stuff coming out. How can you know everything, right? I'm just asking people, on the show, or people that do get this on social media, take your time. Just research it a little bit before you start sharing it, because there's a lot of stuff they're throwing out there because they do want to make you look stupid. Because after a while, it's going to come back to haunt you, because they're going to be like, this was blatantly false. And you push this, and then you're kind of like, oh, I didn't know. And over time, your credibility just starts getting shot. You really won't have a very strong voice at all. And that's susceptible to me, to Aaron, to anyone. Anybody can kind of come down, with this, right? It even can happen to Sampson. In all the great research, or Ian that's doing it, they're very careful. But again, no one's perfect. So it's like, you can't just be perfect with this stuff. But again, it's nice to know that some people are looking at it and saying, hey, we got to be better on the stuff that we're sharing and we're throwing around just because it's like sensational. Like, check it out. George Floyd's a woman. It's a transgendered woman. That's a big woman.
Well, and then definitely what I see a lot is we have to keep our pride in check as well. Because I've seen a lot of people, when you're in this community, you get a new nugget of information, you want to be the first one out, because anybody who's involved in social media, if you're the first person to post something, you'll get 30, 50, 70, 100 likes. If you're the 30th person to post it and nobody's liking it, you know what I mean? They've already seen it. So it's that dopamine hit that social media has created in us, that we want to be the first one to get out there and get the information because everybody needs to hear it, right? But that's another factor of the control system that's been in place that's directed us to where we are currently. This is just another tool that they've used against us. But again, if you say you do post something up and it's wrong, there's nothing wrong, especially if you're a Christian, for being like say you're sorry. Say, hey, look, I messed up. I pushed the wrong thing up. Be humble. Yeah. That's what we're called to be in the first place. We're supposed to be killing off our fleshly attitudes. And again, I really wish, the people who created social media, they don't even let their kids watch it. There's plenty of interviews with the guys who built the algorithms and everything for Facebook, and they don't even let their children play with it, because they understand the psychology, once again, of how it affects you, how it, creates dopamine hits where you feel like you're being a part of things. Again, they've built it so that you just look at the image and you hit share, and that's all you have to do, right? We need to be thinking in a godly perspective and not the social media, the secular world, right? If we need to think, okay, if I post this out there, God, how are my friends and family going to react to this? If this is not true, and I put it out there and I've just cut off relationships with friends and family, when they need to speak to the gospel or they need the gospel spoken to them, who are they going to come to? Because it's not going to be me, because I'm a racist bigot now. So we have to really be careful.
No, I totally agree. It's about being careful, and honestly, if you make a mistake, just be humble, apologize, say I was wrong. It's all good. You know what I mean? No one can be perfect, but it goes a long way when you're humble and you just admit to your mistakes. But it would go a long way if people would just be careful before you share something, or even question that person, not rudely, but just say, hey, like, could I get a source on that? Just by doing that, sometimes asking, nicely, it's like, please, do you please have a source for that? Then it puts the onus on that person that posted it to actually get a source sometimes, and it probably puts them in that little, it just helps overall keep people more accountable, right? But we don't have to be rude about it or demanding or judge people because they're posting stuff, because like you were saying, you can just get in the habit of sharing something and going on. I wanted to ask you a quick question on this, because I'm curious with your idea on this. I have, a lot of people talk about New World Order, and this is all the plan of the New World Order. I've really had a really strong sense in my spirit that something different is going on, completely different. And I've been looking at kind of the events that have been taking place. I see the opposite taking place. I see actually more of a localization versus globalization taking place. I mean, it might be a fate, like a pause for a while, where all of a sudden things are, maybe God is shaking the nations where things kind of get postponed for a while, because for now, I see nations actually getting a little bit more independent, not being so globalized. I think that the outcomes that we're going to see coming up are going to be a lot more, manufacturing coming to America, other countries, not relying on China and other countries. So in the whole scheme of the New World Order, what do you think is the play? Because before it was all about, oh, this is the New World Order, they're going to take over the world, everything's shutting down. But if you actually look at the aftermath and you look at the talk and what's going on, I think it's going to keep escalating. I mean, we're already in a Cold War with China, right? That could actually potentially go to a real war. But I see actually more disintegration. It's almost like the shaking took place and it exposed the vulnerabilities of their setup. Maybe it's not the final setup. Maybe there was things that needed to be shown to the world. But I see things crumbling right now as far as globalization. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I kind of see that too. And I think we see these kind of ebb and flows, though. Like we've seen for, like I said, since 9/11 to here, you see this where something major happens and then they wait almost a generation, and then they work on the next thing. So you'll see these kind of ebb and flow structures. And I believe a lot of times it's because they're testing the people.
So to be clear, you don't think that we're at the beginning of the tribulation?
I think I not that like the beginning of like biblical tribulation.
I'm talking the Great Tribulation. You don't believe we're at the beginning?
No.
I don't either.
Yeah. I definitely think that this is a judgment, but God uses judgments to call the people back to Him.
Correct.
Right? We just literally lived through a Passover. Right. And then we had a Pentecost that you won't see this in the TO or the HRM movement, but in the in the evangelical and charismatic movement, there were all kind of prophets talking about this Pentecost being a re-release and call from the Holy Spirit, right? Mm-hmm. And so the church gets it, but the people that
Passover, I would say there was a lot more significance on this year's Passover, just with the whole idea of everyone was kind of locked down in their home, right? It took on a whole new significance for people. I know that there were other people talking about it, even questioning our family, like, oh, what are you guys doing and stuff. And there was just a different vibe. There was a different spiritual kind of significance to 2020 Passover.
Yeah, no. And there is spiritual things that are going on. And like I said, we're only halfway through the year and we still have several feast days that are coming up. So we don't, and there's a lot of stuff that's happening. There's dates that I'm keeping my eyes on because it keeps seeming to pop up in my studies. So I'm keeping an eye on that. I think there's a halo eclipse that's coming up here on the 21st of June. And then there's something that I keep seeing popping up on July 5th. What they are, at this point, I have no idea because it's literally shaken my eschatology. What I could have nailed down, like a Project Bluebeam, they're going to come out and then they're going to say that they've got the cure for this and this and this. I mean, this is really shaken up my view of how I thought they were going to roll something out.
Yeah. So I think for a lot of people, it was the same way, right? Because like we just talked about the fact of, generationals. I've said to people that I believe that we have multiple generations left. Again, I could be wrong and I'd be happy to be wrong, but I do believe that there's multiple generations left, that we're not, this is in the sense that, we're at the start of the Great Tribulation or that we're the last one. I think that my kids, maybe my kids' kids, you know what I mean? It's really going to get hairy there.
Well, and if that's the case, then glory be to God because He's given us more time, right?
Absolutely, 100%. And I say to people all the time, it's like, you know what? His long suffering, praise God in the sense that He loves people, that He would give them time. And remember, the New World Order might have their plans. He laughs at their plans. And He can literally, in the moment's notice, send them something where it shakes everyone up and they all have to restructure and it takes them a while again. So He might just be buying time because at any point, you got to remember, we're on His story. Right? Yeah. They're not on their story. As far as their timetable is not God's timetable. And anytime He wants to actually have these events take place, it's all according to His sovereign will. So yeah, of course, He can slow these things down. We know ultimately where it's heading, the world unifying as one. I just see it right now, guys. It is getting more dissected, all right? It is getting more fractured. The EU is falling apart. The EU is falling apart, right? All this globalization as far as working together is all falling apart. So to me, I look at it like we could be witnessing the Tower of Babel 2.0. in the sense that, everyone was collectively starting to come together. It was starting to mesh, and they were starting to get everything, the UN, all this. Now it's like, where do they go, right? Because now you got all this infighting and people don't trust one another. I mean, do you think that America is going to trust China for their medical equipment ever again?
Right.
No, but it wasn't just America. It was Canada was held. I mean, Canada was going to the US, and then Trump was like, no, we need it for our people. And they were like, crap, where do we go? And it was like, wow, we got to start maybe manufacturing again. So people were like, they saw kind of the deficiencies in this global like train of trade that it was all over. So I just see that there's a dissecting. It was almost interesting, kind of like a Tower of Babel type scenario where, before he confused their languages. This time he shakes them up, whatever, through a pandemic or whatever, but he sends these things onto the earth. And no matter where you look at this has affected every country on earth. This is literally a shaking or a judgment come to every nation on earth, not just America. I all said at the very beginning of this, America was going to suffer the worst. I said it at the very start of it. I said, America is going to suffer the worst. Not just, I said, not really the coronavirus. That's the minimized version. That's going to cause disruption. It's going to be the economic fallout that's going to take place after that, right? And now, I didn't at the time see what was going to happen. I thought possibly there was going to be some like riots. People were going to get, they didn't want to be in their house for too long, and they were going to, and that was really kind of calm. I mean, people that were protesting, it was all civilized. I mean, what Republican or truthers or patriots were burning cities to the ground? None. I mean, when were they smashing anything? None. Isn't that interesting? The two polar opposites of two different groups of people that were protesting for whatever rights they wanted, and one was peaceful, right? And yet they were frowned upon. The others, they're burning cities to the ground and stuff. So I just thought that was interesting, but I never ever saw anything like this happen, where we're at right now today. But I said that things are going to escalate. It's going to be financial. It's going to be medical. It's going to hit every sector. Now, it's interesting that, have you noticed that before, backtrack, let's just say the agenda of Antifa and all this. Remember all the protests against the military? You notice how like no one talks about the military anymore or the army? It's because they've already got kind of control of that. Like that's why I find it so intriguing that they're going after the police with this. Because you don't hear much talk anymore about the army or the military. It's almost like that's already been infiltrated, if that makes any sense. Morally, as far as what their agendas are, overall, I don't think they are too concerned of it because, military-wise, I think they have full control of that anyways, both sides, right? I mean, it is what it is. It's the military-industrial complex. But with the police, like we were talking about in the program, they are the last defense line between the people and the government.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, we could go into a lot of that. I mean, you've had Nathan Reynolds on here, and I mean, I'm sure you're aware of his, him talking about the Black Awakening and stuff. And I think it's definitely evident how easy it could be for large groups of people to turn themselves over to demonic influence. We see this in the streets that happened, over the last couple of weeks. Yeah. Right. These were your everyday normal people, and they were being severely influenced. Sure. Yep. And just like the officers who do these things, no, they don't want to kill people. No. Right. You don't think there's some kind of influence externally or internally in some cases that are causing them to do these. It's scary to me to see that so many people from all nations, they were probably Christians out there doing the same thing, or, self-proclaimed, all walks of life, all different colors, all whatever, succumbing to the influence of chaos, of anger, of, rage. I mean, they were just giving themselves over to it. And then we talk about like these things in Revelations where people give themselves over, and this is Black Awakening. I mean, you're seeing how easy it can be for that to happen. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really interesting. Like I said, it's so hard for people to pinpoint everything that's going on, but I find it fascinating when I look at the top 4 countries right now that are the most affected with like cases, deaths, with the whole coronavirus thing. I mean, you've got Russia, Brazil, America, and what's interesting about those 4, like I forget the other country, but the whole fact of that is Brazil, they were laughing at it. I mean, the Brazil president was saying, guys, it's the flu. No big deal. Get a hold of yourself. Like he was actually upset because the mayors or whatever were taking a different stance, right? Russia, the same way. I got a good friend in Moscow, and she was telling me that they were laughing at it. It's like, we're Moscow. We're not scared of flu. They were just like, whatever. Putin was like, not at all concerned. And then all of a sudden, he changed he was almost in a panic mode, and he gave people 2 days notice to go out and get, food and supplies. What was intriguing about Moscow or Russia, they literally, if they went out of their house, other than for groceries or pharmacy, They were either going to get a $25,000, and this is I'm translating it into American, but I think it was $25,000 American. That's what it was, a fine or prison time. But they had 2-day notice to go out. But something happened in Russia where they were just blowing it off, no big deal. So I mean, I know a lot of people have their views on coronavirus. I'm just saying that God is sending judgment. I do believe that part of this judgment or shaking, a wake up. Again, I don't think it's supposed to be severe in the sense that it's going to kill millions. If anything, it's very merciful that it only really attacks more elderly people and the numbers are low. I get that. But the fact of the matter is we've never seen a time where every nation of the world, and again, we're talking Iran here. Iran hate America. What you think they're even part of, any type of agenda? In that sense, they're not. And again, you have all these different countries. You can just watch for yourself and see what they do. Some aren't doing anything. Some are doing stuff. And you watch this all unfold and you're kind of like, isn't it interesting? I don't think the whole COVID thing is over. You might think, oh, it's over, it's done. It's not done. I mean, things are going to still happen. So a lot of people have called me on it and said, oh, you were wrong and you said this and that. Listen, guys, I was saying that if nothing was done, nothing. I don't think that they should have gone to the extent they did. But the fact is that if they did absolutely nothing, the numbers would be a heck of a lot larger. People were laughing at me when I said that it would be, I did say if nothing was done, it would be million. Nothing at all. But already it's getting close to 120,000 people in America. And again, that's with lockdown. I was giving the figures based on if they did nothing. You could start looking at certain countries that basically laughed at this and said, no big deal. We're just going to let everyone get it. Britain was a prime example, the UK. And then finally he changed course because people were saying, listen, it's going to be serious. And I would say, if you look at the modeling, if he waited, say, another 2 weeks, the numbers would probably be double or triple. So don't get me wrong, though. I'm not saying that I don't see the agendas. I'm not saying they won't take a crisis and let it go to waste. They were trampling on the rights. I think everyone had the right to stand up, for their amendments and all that. I'm all a big believer on that. But this whole idea that people think they have it all figured out, that it's just a hoax, it's no big deal, they have it all figured out. We're living in a world, a spiritual world, where all of a sudden God's in control and you got the wicked principalities. But there's stuff that doesn't meet the eye. I mean, as far as I mentioned before about the locusts, that God sends the locusts. Well, I mean, you have countries that are having the largest infestations of locusts they've ever had in like a half a century, right? You've got like massive things like the fires that were burning. I'm just saying that as far as the birth pains, we are definitely seeing an escalation to a point where no other time in history can you pinpoint a time where this many countries simultaneously are being affected by so many things. They're all going to be affected. Their economies are all going to be affected. Again, we're not going to see it trickle until all these stimulus and all these printing of money goes through the system. But I still think we're headed towards some serious bad times. And I'm talking every country. I'm not talking just America. As far as these race wars and taking over police stations, I think it's just the start. So we definitely are seeing a point in history where everything is starting to kind of break down. The question is, why is God allowing it? Right? If you take that view, I say that God is purposing, he's sending judgment. He's sending a wake-up call to all the nations. And it's a beautiful thing because all he's doing it in love. And he's saying, please wake up. You know the verse in Isaiah, if my people will humble themselves and turn from their wicked ways and seek my face, right? I will heal their land. You know the verse I'm talking about, right?
Absolutely.
And honestly, that's I guess that's the whole essence of the show is we've got to look at it from the spiritual point of view that if we honestly do this, it is a promise. He says, if you do this, I will heal your land. He can heal the land. He can heal America. He can heal any country he wants. If my people, and that's a key thing, my people, who are his people, right? We all have to do it. So that's what our message needs to be in the Christian truth or communities. Guys, let's collectively, if we're going to collectively come together with anything, we can have disagreements and different viewpoints. Let's come together and let's seriously pray, seek him, and do that so that he would heal the land because he will. And like we brought up Sodom and Gomorrah, he literally said, hey, if I can find 50 people, right? Then he's like, can I find 30 people, 20 people, 5? I mean, God's going to be pretty gracious. I mean, maybe if only 5% of us did this, it probably would change. We'll never know this, but we kind of think that everyone have to do this. We might be surprised to learn that if only 10 of us would do it, it probably could change things. But the question is, would 10 of us honestly do it? It's just, it's weird. We'll never know these things, but really in the spiritual dimension, it's like this is a judgment. There is no doubt, like I said, there's never been a time where this many nations at the same time have been judged by so many different factors, economically, medically, health, whatever, riots, whatever. It's all going to start translating. You're going to see this happen in all these different countries. Again, America, they'll say is just kind of the one of those pinnacle points. But I think America, it's almost like he's looking at it and he's saying, I'm really relying on you, and the fact that your judgment has come to you, because who do you think is basically spewing all the garbage to the rest of the world through Hollywood? It's America,
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it was Billy Graham's wife has this quote. I'll say this quote, and then people will say, oh, where's that quote from? But she said, listen, if judgment doesn't come to America soon, he will have to go back to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, you brought it up as well. You said, look at all of the sinful stuff that's going on in America. I mean, it's putrid. It's awful. And to think that, well, I'm Christian, it's no big deal. Judgment's even coming to you,
It says judgment starts first with his ecclesia, with his people.
Sure. And it's probably been happening for a time, but now he's just like, you know what? I'm going to shake all the nations. I'm going to be like, I am God. And at some point, you're going to stop and go, okay, wait a minute. Do we think that man can simultaneously create this many events? Let's just say the next 6 months, there's like massive earthquakes, there's something else, there's who knows? I joke around, but maybe there's like a UFO kind of, content. What I'm saying, if that many things happen all at once at the same time, guys, it's supernatural. It's not man created. We talked about the spiritual realm and we talked about wicked men in the New World Order, but like, as we explained in the show, our war isn't with flesh and blood, it's with principalities. So at the very least, guys, you have to understand that everything that we're seeing happen all across the world, this is supernatural. This is spiritual.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And I think 2 points here real quick. I mean, I don't put God in a box. I've learned that God, regardless of the plans of mice and men, God's going to do what he's going to do. Yeah. And, maybe I don't like living in the hypothetical, but let's just say hypothetically, they created COVID-19 in a facility and released it in China for whatever reason, right? And it spread around. Maybe they intentionally, the powers that be, I mean, if you look at the Georgia Guidestones, they want to kill off all but 500 million people, right? They were at 6.8 or 7 billion people. That's a lot of people, right? So maybe the intent in the New World Order, right? The NWO is we got to release some kind of virus. You got, Bill Gates saying, oh, everybody's going to die, 300 million, whatever, right? Let's say that was their intent, but it was not God's divine providence, and he smashed that before it even got started. Maybe, it's like you were talking about with Putin and some of these other governments. They were like, it took him a week to get the message to say, hey, look.
Putin was laughing at it. He was like, it's ridiculous. The Brazilian president was like, guys, chill out. We all get the flu. Give me a break. Like, he literally, I watched it week after week laughing. He was in press conferences. He said, guys, get a grip. Get a grip. And now look at Brazil. It is a flipping mess, man. They have they're climbing up on America. Like, the numbers are staggering. And Russia's number 2. Russia, there was nothing going on. And I mean, all of a sudden it was just like panic mode set in, and all of a sudden it creeped into their country, and it was like this, almost like a very, very subtle. And I agree with you. That's a good way of looking at it. Maybe he completely minimized. Maybe it was actually sent as a real destructive thing to kill a ton of people, but God basically in his sovereignty made it, very, very light. You know what I mean? That's an interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah, and the reason why I say that is because God is in control of all of this. And we were in the middle of a show a couple weeks ago where we were talking about Q, right? And God hit me with this. So anybody that knows Q knows that 17 is Q's number, right? Like 17 is the 17th letter Q. Trump says 17 all the time. Like he said, this new missile they were building is 17 times faster than every other missile, right? He repeats 17 all over the time. It's supposed to be like a Q drop, right? But in the middle of this, we were having this conversation about Q, right? God says, go look up Revelation 17:17. And I was like, okay, that's weird, right? Because we're talking about Q and 17 and all this other stuff, right? So Revelation 17:17 says, for God hath put it in their hearts to fulfill his will and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast until the words of God shall be fulfilled. Remember, all of this is prophesied. What this is saying is that God, just like, God turned the heart of Pharaoh so that he could release those people and fulfill everything that he said about those, the Hebrew people, right? He says right here that he has put it in their hearts to fulfill his will and to agree to give their kingdoms unto the beast. We're talking about the beast system, that they are doing it because God has established this, because he told John, he told David, or Daniel, he told Ezekiel, he gave them prophecies of end times, Enoch, right? Of prophecies of end times, and all of these things have to be fulfilled because God isn't a liar, right? And so all of the stuff that we're seeing, even if man decided that they wanted to screw things up and they wanted to kill people, if it's not God's design, then he is not going to let it happen, right? We are on the winning side of a battle here. I can't press this enough. It's a beautiful war, but this is a war, and we are on the winning side. Satan's too prideful to even realize that he's going to lose, right? But they are going to try as hard as they can, and once it gets to a certain point, we're going to see. I mean, we think this is bad. This is nothing, right? I pray that it doesn't come in my generation, right? I've got a 1-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old little boy, right? I don't want them to go through this right now, right? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I want them to build a relationship with the Father, and to be outreached, and to go out there and preach the gospel. I don't want everything to happen right now. Like I'm just getting to know my 1-year-old daughter. You know what I mean? Yeah. But God's going to do what he's going to do, because even Jesus himself said it, that all of these things must come to pass before I can return.
Correct.
Right. So we have to stop fighting about this and is this fake or this real? I mean, honestly, in the grand scheme of things, we can, and you're talking to somebody who is part of some of the biggest, exposing some of the biggest conspiracy theories and stuff over the last 20 years, right? I've been involved in this. And then, Ian and my channel, our SITREP show, I mean, it's all about this kind of stuff, right? Yeah. Talking about things that are going on, right? But in the grander scheme of things, as a Christian, as a believer, we should not be concerned with what the world is doing. Right. Correct. It's not about exposing everything. Right. Correct. I mean, it is about our Great Commission, about going out and preaching the gospel. That is truth. Right. If we're a truther, truther should be synonymous with Christian. Right. Yeah. It should be one and the same, because Christ, the Messiah, was truth. Right. He was the living word.
Embodiment.
Right?
He's the embodiment of truth. I mean, you can't get more truthful than him.
So if your truther circle and your truther, like the sole understanding of your truther community, or you're out there pushing is not centrifugal, like is not Christ-centered, then the truth you're pushing is worldly truth. Yeah. And it only goes so far. Like I said, if we expose all this stuff and you're putting out all this stuff that happened with these riots and stuff, is it really doing any good? Because like I said, if they would have taken those guys out of their homes and hung those police officers, and it wouldn't have stopped it, what is a meme going to do? It's not going to do anything, right? But the truth of Jesus, and as the Messiah who died for the sins of mankind, that is the truth that changes lives. That is the truth that changes nations. And there was an atheist I just saw a quote from not too long ago. He was talking about how Christendom changed the overall understanding of our world today. I mean, do you understand, if Christianity didn't come, we would still be worshiping the old gods of old, sacrificing our babies to Baal, right? I mean, can you imagine if Viking culture was the one that won, right? Or the Mongolians or Roman culture survived, and there was no Christ? Can you imagine what our world would be like? Oh wow! It's God's divine providence. I don't know why he's got
I always
that,
explain that when people minimize, they say, Christians have murdered so many people, the Inquisition. I'm like, guys, go down in any city you live in and look at who's actually feeding the poor. Look at who's actually doing the work, right? If you actually look at any inner city, it's Christian ministries. I don't know what it's like, mainly, but I know right across Canada, the States, you find that basically when it comes down to really the ones that are really doing these type of things, it's Christians. Right? Like people say, oh, we'd be better off if Christianity never existed. Honestly, like you're bringing up a really strong point. It's true. The world would be horrifying, because you would wipe out a ton of ministries and a ton of organizations that their sole purpose are doing what the Bible commanded them to do, right? And it was these outreach and all this. This is what you see predominantly through Christian ministries.
Yeah. But I mean, I could go on and expand on that. I mean, the whole concept of our, our marriage structure, our the Protestant Reformation, I mean, pretty much curbed all of the adulterous behaviors of humankind. Like the whole idea that we live in a society based around, family centric, married, the husband doesn't go run around is all Christian based. I mean, that it all stems from this. I mean, it's just crazy to think
That's why
about.
the family. That's and again getting into the spiritual war. That's why the family. Interesting. If you actually look at LaVey and you look at a lot of this satanic literature, New Age, a lot of that stuff was attacking the family. It was actually the church was second. It was like take out the family first, then move to the church. But really, the public enemy number one was the family. We need to restructure. We need to destroy the family. I mean, start taking fathers out of the home, and there you go. Right. A lot of those kids that you saw rioting, ask them. Most of them probably didn't have good fathers. Right? That's exactly what's going on. And especially when it comes to this whole issue, why the things are happening the way they're happening is because the fathers have left or they had broken homes. And quite honestly, statistically speaking, you have a much greater chance of getting into crime, getting to prison, even getting shot, joining a gang if the father is not in the picture.
Yeah.
Period. God knew all along that the family unit, marriage itself, one man, one woman, all these type of things, it's the bedrock of society. I mean, you take that out of the mix. I mean, you've got completely just a messed up scenario going on.
Yeah, no, and that's why I do believe we are. I mean, if you look at prophecy, we are in. I mean, there's like you can't say that any other time in history would be able to fulfill prophecy to where it is today.
True.
So I have to say that, I mean, things like it's prophesied that we will travel to and fro and that knowledge will increase. Well, I mean, that pretty much fits the bill for where we're at right now, because never before were they able to travel and have the knowledge. I mean, you have an entire access to an entire library database of information on your Google phone, you know what I mean, that no other generation has ever been able to have. So a lot of these things that we're seeing today would have never, ever been able to happen any other time in history. So, and we're seeing this, what I call a degeneration of society. It's like, your toilet water going down the down the tube. Mm-hmm. As they have gotten into the family unit and destroyed the family unit, it has caused a spiral effect, and it continues. And we're just talking from a psychological standpoint, sure. But from a generational standpoint, we know of generational curses, and people are just wrapping their children up into further and further generational curses down the line. And this is, I mean, ultimately, it's going to get to a point where there is no return. And I think this is what God has forecast for us, mm-hmm. is that the people, there will be no more salvation for the people, because they will just be so lost. And we're not in that point yet. So we need to be thankful for that. And we need to be out there outreaching to people, because, I mean, if you're not doing it, then who is? Right? I mean, how many people are actually
going back to the time where the continual thoughts of men were evil all the time? I mean, that's a scary situation. Can you imagine living in a world where every single thought that men had were evil? I mean, that's insane.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, I know it may look bad right now, but I definitely think
there's worse. There's
God is in control, and it will be undeniable when we see. Like, I can definitely see we're moving into it, right? But I don't think we're not going to start hearing the trumpets within the next couple of days, right? No, we have some time.
No, I agree.
But how are you going to use that time?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
and we talk about this all. I was just sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But so we talk about this all the time. I don't. The movie that keeps sticking into my head is called Hacksaw Ridge, and I haven't seen it. It's amazing. But the guy is up on top of this ridge, right? And there's just a huge battle that just happened up there, and he's up there and he's grabbing people and he's lowering them down to the medics who are on the bottom, right? And he's not distinguishing between enemy or he's up there all night, and you just keep, it just does this thing of him showing him grab this one person, lower him down, and then he's running across there, but he keeps saying, God, please, just one more, give me the strength for one more. That's how our Christian walk should be, right? Up there all night, not distinguishing. The whole movie, he's like, I'm not going to fight. I'm just here. He was a medic, and he's like, I'm just here to help, right? So he wouldn't use a gun, refused to shoot, anything like that. He's not up there shooting people and killing them. He's trying to save anybody. And the people at the bottom are going, who is up there dropping all these people down here? And why is he dropping enemies down? To him, it didn't make any difference. But every single time he was like, this guy's dragging bodies across the battlefield to drop them down a hill. His hands are blistered and bloodied, and he's just saying, please, God, just give me the strength for one more. That's how our walk should be, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
as much as craziness and war and battle is going on to us, our focus should be, please God, just let me get one more,
I
right?
agree. I agree. Yep.
That is where we need to be at.
Yep, yep. It's like send them my way. You know what I mean? Like, I'm available, Lord. It's like basically just saying that you're available to do His will.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, that's how we're gonna see change. It starts with us, right? Just like the
Yep.
judgment, right? We need in this time where we're seeing things going on out there in the world is now when we should be on our knees praying. Like I said earlier when we were talking about Abraham, right?
Hmm.
Abraham was like argue because God he really hit me with this because the first time when I started seeing them tearing up my city, I was like, oh my God, what is going on? This is a beautiful city. Everything's getting destroyed and people are getting hurt. And then I felt the conviction of the Father and said, do you want to be an Abraham or a Lot's wife?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Are you going to be praying for these people? I mean, even Lot and his family the angels had to pull him out of there.
Yeah.
Like, hey, come on, guys, right?
Yeah.
I mean, do you want to be an Abraham who God comes to and you're able to bargain with him and say, look, save whoever you can. There's got to be good people in there. Or do you want to be Lot's wife who's looking back at the destruction saying, oh no, and then of course
Yeah.
you know what happens to her, right?
Yeah.
So we need to be, when we're dealing with this, seeing all of this stuff that's happening out there, man, we need to be on our hands and knees and we need to be talking to God and saying, look, God, I know that there are people out there who are in those riots who know you, who need you, and their hearts. Send somebody in there or send me in there to go get them, go let me preach to them. I know this person at work that I'm talking to who they're so caught up in this. They're so full of hate because of everything that media is telling them.
Yeah.
Go pray with them, go talk to them. Let the Holy Spirit do what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
I mean, we need to be functionally working in the Spirit and stay off of social media.
Well, that's the thing. Deep down inside, these people, and what we fail to recognize sometimes is that these people that are out there and they're mad, they're angry, deep down inside, they're scared, they're shaken, they're unsure. I mean, they don't have a foundation. They don't really have the truth. I mean, they're speaking on the things that they believe they're passionate about, or they believe to be the truth. But my point is this: they're lost. They don't have all the answers. They don't understand the world. I mean, that's where we do have the answers. I mean, we can share the truth with them. It has nothing to do with the issues, right? You can sympathize, you can talk to them about the issues, but really when it comes down to it, they're lost. They're lost and they're in big trouble. So no matter who you see, whatever they're coming across, understand that if they die, they're in a very, very bad situation. I mean, they're lost forever, for eternity. I mean, it's a serious situation. And here you have that opportunity. And again, you don't want to live with regrets. Sometimes, every people will say you don't want to live with regrets. But in the spiritual sense, honestly, if you have a person, at work or, you could be ministering to her, or you talk to her, just be there for them. Quite honestly, I mean, you got to look at it that way because ultimately that is the end goal. Our whole purpose, the Great Commission is go out and preach the gospel, period. So, I mean, you have to look at whatever you do, that has to be part of it. Again, it doesn't have to be the thing you say every day, all the time. But honestly, it needs to be like the end result of whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Everything, because again, we're kingdom living. We're aliens in this world. I mean, this world is not our home. We look around, we don't understand it. We think it's so wicked and evil. The fact is, this is not our home. This is not the way it's supposed to be. I mean, there's a better place for us, sort of thing. But we're here for a task. We've been set here for a mission. I mean, in a war, we have a certain position. And what is your position? And people say, well, I don't know if I'm called to be on the front lines. Well, maybe not. Maybe you're help supporting the people that are on the front lines. Maybe you're, a medic helping people that get injured or whatever. But you have all these different positions, kind of like the body of Christ, the body of believers. Somebody's an elbow, somebody's a knee, somebody's a leg, somebody's an arm. Like, we all are different. That's why we're going to look at each other and go, hey, arm, you're bending the wrong way. And the leg says, no, I'm bending fine. Right? It's like, no, you're bending wrong. You know what I mean? And it's like, you're both bending fine. But again, the arm is arguing with the leg because it's not bending the same way,
Yeah.
It's
and then you kind of touched on that earlier with the different denominations. I completely agree. I think that God has allowed that because we are not all the same. And the thing is, and we function differently too. Like you can't, the finger can't tell the eye it knows how to see better than it does.
Yes.
You know what I mean? There are so many things going on, and God is using different things all over the place. Like I just want people to understand. There was a passage. I was just gonna. I've got to find it now, but there was a passage that was talked about where the apostles came up to Jesus and they said, "Hey, there's these other guys going around here, and they're casting out demons in your name." And he's like, "Leave them alone, guys. Like, if they're casting out demons and they're not gonna, then the Holy Spirit is in them, and they're not gonna be saying anything negative against me." So, because they ran up to him and like told him to stop, And he's like, "Just leave them alone." I think I just pulled it up here. So yeah, it's Mark 9:38 through 41. It says, "Teacher," said John, "we saw someone driving out demons in your name, and we told him to stop because he was not one of us. Do we not stop it, or do not stop him?" Jesus said, "For no one who does miracles in my name can in the next moment say anything bad about me. Yeah. For whoever is not against us is for us. Truly I tell you, anyone who gives you a cup of water in my name is because you belong to the Messiah will certainly not lose their reward." Right? So we've got all these people, pointing at other people and saying, "You're not Christian," just like and don't look, guys, the apostles even fell into that. Okay. So don't feel like, okay, well, I've screwed up big time, right? We just repent. And then remember that you got brothers and sisters out there who the Holy Spirit hasn't gotten to the same point as you and may never, right? But we have to remember, we just had this big conversation the other day about when Jesus goes out and he tells everybody, "You clothed me, you fed me, you when I was naked, you clothed me. When I was hungry, you fed me." And the people were like, "Jesus, we never did that." And he goes, "No, but if you've done it to the least of these," and he's speaking of the body, right? He says, "If you've done the least of these, then you have done it unto me." And then he looks at another group and says, "Look, when I was hungry, you didn't feed me. When I was thirsty, you didn't give me drink. When I was tired, you didn't give me rest." And they're like, "Jesus, no, we didn't." He goes, "No, but the least that you have done unto this body, then you have done unto me." And he says the same thing to Paul when he meets Paul on the road, right? Yeah. He says, "You persecuted me, my body," right? And even though Paul didn't persecute Jesus, he had, Stephen killed, right? But he says, "You persecuted me." It's the same word. He's talking about his body, right? God is the head. We are the body. Yeah. And he's like saying, "You persecuted us," right? So we have to really be careful, guys, because we are all brothers and sisters, and we're in this, like we're going through this, and God is using each one of us to do different things. And yes, there will be some people, and there are many warnings about sheep's, or wolves in sheep's clothing, and false teachers and false prophets and all those things. But a lot of those are sent there because God wants us to be a Berean and see and find those people amongst us and be able to expose them, right? Yeah. So, but for the most part, though, I mean, if you don't have discernment, like I said, I've seen so many people that are like, "I'm a watchman on the wall, I'm a watchman on the wall," and then they shoot arrows at the people who are inside the account.
Overall, obviously the apostles running around, and anytime someone's like praising Jesus' name, that they would be like so skeptical, like, "Oh, I don't know, is he for sure? Like maybe he's preaching another Jesus." Like, I think we need to relax a little bit. I agree to have discernment, but over time that will just kind of come out. Like you'll get that sense. But I think your whole life, if you're always like looking over your shoulder, like, "Oh, there's wolves everywhere," you know what I mean? It's not a good way to live. Live victorious in the sense that you've got this purpose. I mean, the show, the title, but really think about this. All the world's a stage, but you've been set on that stage, so do your part. I mean, everyone talks about, how everything's orchestrated by the evil guys. Okay, fine. If all the world's a stage, God has put you on that stage. Play your part. The question is, what is your part? And again, read the Bible, find out, pray, and you're going to find out very quickly what your part is to play on the world stage. Again, yes, the world is a stage. He's watching it. He's watching you play out your part. Are you doing it? Are you actually doing it? Are you complaining to the union about, your fees, and you're not going to, do your part until you get paid enough, Like the question is, you're there, you're on the world stage. It's fine. There's villains and there's good guys. You've been placed there, and he's got a part for you to play. And he's saying, guys, preach the good news. Preach the good news. There's going to be a lot of wicked. It's going to get darker and darker and darker and darker. You're going to see some crazy things happen in your lifetime, in your children's lifetime. That's what we need to kind of pass on to our children, is like, you're the light, right? Don't fear. Have no fear, and play the part that he's watching you and wanting you to do. And he's going to be watching you, and he's going to be with you every step of the way. And you have the power of the Holy Spirit endowed in you to honestly preach with fire. You do. You do, and you'd be surprised what will happen when you kind of just give it over to him and say, no matter what goes on, you could walk right into a protest and just love on them, and you'd be surprised what would happen, right? But again, it's fear that gets us back. We're like, well, I could do that. Maybe I get attacked or whatever. Again, we just need to do that. We need to do that on the world stage that we're watching unfold. What's our part to play? And God definitely has the part. Everything is his story. Again, the question is, if a book was going to be written on you, kind of like when you look at the people in the Bible, if something was to be written on you, what story is going to be told? You know, what story is going to be told if they were reading your story? And again, I think that's really profound when we kind of look at any situation and all this whole idea like, oh, the world's getting so wicked. It's getting, this losing all this hope. It's like, be victorious. I mean, he literally has conquered death. I mean, he's conquered the world. I mean, we literally are ambassadors for him. I mean, think of how profound that is. Not just that we're ambassadors, we're sons and daughters. We're literally adopted into the family, He loves us, man. And again, he is going to make sure that his will is accomplished. And it's such an amazing opportunity to know that you literally are going to be part of history being used by him for his purposes and literally to bring praise to his name, and to be glorified, for his namesake. It is a very powerful thing. So I just wanted to kind of end with that. It's been an amazing show. We've gone like 3 hours. So it's been awesome.
Yeah, I could go 3 more. But.
Oh, yeah, 100%. We'll maybe do a marathon show at some point or something, because I can go a long time. But we should definitely cut it short. But I just wanted to say that because I think it's important. I think a lot of people do have that realization that the world's a stage. We've gone through this. We've talked about how everything's kind of all being worked on. We've also definitely talked about the sovereignty of God, that he can slow things down. He can minimize things. He can not allow something to happen, or he can allow something to happen. He is in control. And again, if we are on a world stage, then let's play our part. Let's play our part. And he's calling us to do it. So anyways, hey, just, finishing up, maybe just mention any information, links, how people can get in contact with you before we...
Sure. Yeah. So I personally have my own YouTube channel. If you want to check out my, kind of my background, my story. I have a video on Omega Chronicles TV. I'm also mirroring, I'm in the process of mirroring all of them because we have 20, I think we're up to 23 episodes of SITREP. So I at least have the first 10, I think, on my channel, but we'll have the rest of them uploaded later. So Omega Chronicles TV is my channel, and it has my testimonial, which I'm going to add some more stuff, some of my off-the-cuff stuff, and then some of my other appearances. And then the channel that we are primarily working out of, which is called the Holy Hand Grenade. You just type Holy Hand Grenade in there, you're going to find the only channel that's named that. Of course, you're going to find like a whole bunch of stuff from Monty Python, but so the Holy Hand Grenade channel, and it's called SITREP 2020. And so that is our situation report that we do weekly on Wednesday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern time. And those are live, so you can come over, you can jump in the chat. Don't forget to like and join both those channels and be a part of it. If you're a Facebook user, we just started up our SITREP community, like fellowship page on there. It's a group, and it's called SITREP Resistance, because that's our big slogan, is that this is a war, this is a battle, this is a spiritual warfare, and you, if you're listening to this, are part of the resistance. So those are our links. Again, I want to point out Val Owens, his WokeJournalist, since we're talking about all of this truther stuff. If you want to be a part of that, reach out to him. Go to the site WokeJournalist.com, and you can be a part of that with the fact checking. You could submit things to be fact checked. It's going to be a great resource for the truther community to be able to, if you want to share that meme and you don't know if it's true or not, you'll be able to access a group of people who would love to investigate that and find out if it's true or not. So we want to get that off the ground. Val's a great guy, and we're going to see more from him in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to get him on a future show, and I will add that link into the description. But for now, I've got both channels listed in the description on YouTube. So if you go to the YouTube description, you'll find out the link to Omega Chronicles TV, and then also the Holy Hand Grenade.
Holy Hand Grenade,
Holy Hand Grenade, where they do their show together with Ian Chadrick. And like I said, at a future show, I'm going to get both the guys on, and that'll be a real good show because you guys can just go back and forth and talk about.
You're going to do like a 6-hour time block.
Yeah, we'll need a 6-hour show for that one, but we'll do a good long show on that one. But hey, man, it's been awesome. So glad to finally get you on the show. It's been a real pleasure getting you on, and I'm sure everyone really enjoyed everything that you had to say in our conversation and getting into everything. But it's so important, especially with the times that we're living, that there's people that are out there that are really looking at the information, but really they understand the heart of it, and they want to get back to really just focusing back on Jesus and saying, hey, like let's do things that make him proud. and to glorify him. So really appreciate your time coming on tonight. Everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. Celebrate Truth Radio. I'm your host, Robbie Davidson. This was episode 68. We'll join you again. Come and see us next week. Same time, same place. Good night, everyone. Blessings to you.